Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the other half of my demon elemental identity, Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Not sure where you want me to go with this intro, Scott. This is a weird one. The implications there are pretty... let's just move on.
This week on the show, the Song of Susannah continues as we discuss stanzas 5, 6, and 7. In this week's reading, Susannah, Detta, and Mia finally get to have their palaver, and we learn a whole lot more about how the world of the Dark Tower works. Then Roland and Eddie find themselves in the middle of an ambush with a lot of old friends and one new friend. Matt, what did you think about this week's reading?
Things are getting weird. Things are getting exciting. I mean, basically, like you said, we get one awesome, intense gunfight and a lot of interesting world building stuff, and what's the word, like backstory, I guess, backstory to the world, to the big mythos. So there's a lot going on here. This is one of those weeks where I'm just like, we're gonna go overtime, aren't we?
Probably. I tried to be very brief on some of this. It gets really into the details, and I tried to be very brief in my notes covering a lot of this mythos of the Dark Tower that we're defining in this week's episode. But yeah, it's a big episode. It's a big couple of chapters. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of ways in which Mia's conversation with Susannah redefines our understanding of what this world is and what the stakes are and what's happening. Man, it's just a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, can't wait to get into it in detail.
Yeah, so let's waste no time and just jump right into it in detail. How about that?
Okay.
For once, we're gonna like 2 minutes in, we're just gonna get into the chapters for once.
It's wild.
All right, so we begin with the 5th stanza of Song of Susannah titled The Turtle, and this chapter picks up right where we left off last week with Mia, Susannah, and Detta Holmes arguing inside the body of one person on a park bench in Manhattan. Mia agrees to the palaver that Detta basically forced her to agree to, but says they need to do it face to face, whatever that means, and they need to do it somewhere a bit more private. She wants to go to the banquet room of the Castle of the Abyss, where we saw her enjoy her nightly feasts back in the last book. Ooh.
Yeah. As soon as this idea was floated, I couldn't wait to see it happen. It's just such a fun thought.
They don't go to the banquet room, though. They have to go outside, which makes it an even more ominous scene.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of a good general summary of these first 2 chapters of this week's reading, at least, are focused on exactly who Mia is. And while we learn a lot about who she is, we don't exactly get a straight answer to it. But I when I was reading over this section again, there's this part really early on in this fifth chapter that I think King is like very slyly priming us for some of the reveals that are going to come later in the next chapter. Because when talking about the castle, Mia mentions that both Roland and Jake saw her in the castle before, and then she drops this little tidbit. I have met them both before. Who? Jake and Roland? I, they. Where? When? How could you? So, and then she gets cut off. This is, of course, setting us up for the wonderful reveal later related to an event that occurs all the way back in the Gunslinger. But more on that later.
I didn't even catch that little exchange that you pulled out where she said she met them before. Because, that's right. That's right there.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense when we learn that Mia, on some level, believes she is the demon elemental, and we'll talk about how true or not true that is when we get to that section. But if she believes that she's at least partially this demon elemental, then this line makes a lot of sense.
It does seem like there must be something of the demon elemental in her, because I mean, if she remembers meeting them, then she must have some of the memories of the demon elemental, even if there's more to her than that.
Oh, sure. I mean, it is possible that she's just remembering Susannah being told about the meeting.
That's true. Yeah.
And backfilling everything else. We don't really understand.
I'm sure we'll find out.
Susannah is trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do with no money. She understands they need to get somewhere private to have their palaver, but they have no money. They look homeless. Her shirt's still covered in blood. And then suddenly she finds herself transported back to the doorway cave, back in the past, in that doorway cave where Callahan and Eddie were there to do their main errand back in the first book. So just randomly, she's just sitting there talking, and then randomly she's in a vision of the past where Callahan and Eddie first went to the door.
Yeah, it seems like this is the sort of thing that happens a few times this week where people will essentially, with no obvious reason, be given like a psychic vision. I guess this is the first time that it happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I love, so there's a lot going on in this vision, and we'll get to all of it. But the thing that really jumped out at me here was she goes into the cave and she hears Henry harassing Eddie, which we know happened because we were there with Eddie the last time he was in this cave and Henry was there. And Susannah's reaction to this is way bigger than we thought it was. Susannah's disorientation was nothing to the fury she felt at the sound of that nagging, hectoring voice. Most of what was wrong with Eddie was your fault, she screamed at him. You should have done everyone a favor and died young, Henry. It's just like, I don't think we've ever seen her, just outspokenly that passionate about Eddie's past,
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It makes sense. We had no idea that she felt this strongly. I guess it does sort of seem in keeping with her character that even if she felt all of this rage and resentment toward this character who, in her mind tormented her beloved, that she would keep that bottled up, right?
Sure.
That does seem like our Susannah. But yeah, it's interesting. And I think this is the sort of thing, I've conjectured that like this is the book of Susannah. I mean, it's kind of obviously is the book of Susannah. Like we're spending more time with Susannah. It's got the whole stanzas thing and so forth. So like as we're in the book of Susannah, we're learning kind of the hidden depths to Susannah, the things that she was thinking all this time but not saying and not letting us know.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I wonder, like, there's a lot of talk about that Susannah says that a lot of the way Mia behaves and a lot of the way Mia is reacting to certain things is a reflection of her. She sees a lot of herself in Mia because Mia is at least partially made up of Susannah herself. And I wonder if part of Susannah, at least at this moment, is made up of Mia. And so maybe a lot of this anger, this rage is being channeled through this other force that's taken up residence inside her that later says that she's basically like, what's the word? She's taken her over. She's possessed her.
Yeah, I do like to sort of try to notice possible like bleed over between personalities, because one thing that I noticed, I think there's going to be more opportunity to talk about this later, but just the fact that Detta throughout the drawing of the three was like this terrifying like rage monster, and the Detta that we are meeting, that we're interacting with here is she's still kind of vicious, but she's a lot more reasonable, actually.
Yeah, that's fair.
So maybe there's been some crossover in both directions there.
Yeah, I like that. Let's talk about that when we really dive into these women's personalities later.
Okay.
So as she's basically screaming to nothingness, and Eddie himself enters her mind and tells her to just quiet down and watch, because there's a reason she's seeing this. There's a reason she's seeing this scene. And that reason is, Matt, that little seed that Stephen King planted in our brains near the very end of last book, that little thing that Eddie felt in the pocket of the bowling bag that he just kind of forgot about. And then King told us, well, the next time we saw this thing, it was Susannah that found it. And here is that moment. That thing sewn into the secret pocket of this bag. So, Matt, this isn't Todash. The text says that explicitly, right? The text explicitly tries to differentiate what's happening here from a Todash state. But how did it happen? Like, Eddie spoke with Susannah in this memory. Like he reached out to her. She speculates that he sent this vision to her. What do you think is going on?
Well, he obviously didn't send the vision to her in this moment, unless it was subconscious, which doesn't really sound right to me. We also, we have other examples of like quartet members speaking to each other in ways where it's sort of impossible that be the case. Like I remember occasions where like Roland's voice would be in Jake's head or Roland's voice would be in Eddie's head. And it's like, well, we know this isn't actually Roland saying this because Roland is elsewhere and he's not aware this is happening. That the specifics escape me, but I know this has happened before in the story. So I wonder, I mean, I always kind of want to try to get time travel tangled up in things for just because that's part of what the book is. And so I wonder if like these messages aren't being sent. So the messages are being sent by Eddie, but they're being sent by Eddie at a different point in time. So it's like future Eddie potentially. Some Eddie later on in the story knows that that Susannah needs this information, and so he sends it. The only other possibility I can think of is that that's not Eddie at all. It's just a good entity taking on the guise of Eddie in order to basically get her, trust, or a bad entity for that matter, taking on the guise of Eddie to get her trust. So there's a few options there, I guess. I think I actually kind of lean toward the time travel one, but I don't know why exactly. I just do.
Okay. That's interesting stuff. We'll think about that.
And it could just be Susan's like seeing power that she has, just kind of acting up, and she's seeing what she needs to see because that's what her power is.
Yeah. That's possible. That's a powerful power if you can just allow yourself to see things you didn't even know existed beforehand. Like that would be like her summoning the Dogen without ever being told about the Dogen. That'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of like apparently Jake can just know how Susannah is doing magically. So I mean, with the touch, right?
Sure.
So I mean, if her power is anything on the order of his touch, then maybe so. I don't know. I'm not arguing for it. I'm just wondering out loud.
Yeah, no, I got you. Whatever it is, it comes to Susannah in her exact moment of need and delivers the answer to the question which she's seeking. And as we're talking about this bowling bag, one thing I think we haven't mentioned is that not only does a bowling bag change names, like, it changed from Midtown lanes to Midworld lanes based on which world it was in, but it also is changing colors. In Midworld, this bag is pink like the rose, or some versions of the rose. It's interesting because like the rose has been red before, but also they refer to it as pink sometimes. Pink like Merlin's grapefruit. But in 1999 New York City, when they are in this world, the bag is red. And Susannah specifically notes this week that the bag had changed colors. So I just wanted to bring this up because you had your long color theory back in Wizard and Glass, and we're getting more data for it.
We're getting more data, but it doesn't clarify things for me, honestly. Like, because the old theory was that red is like good, red is love, pink is bad, pink is lust. Maybe because this world is in some sense closer to the tower, closer to the rose, then stuff just kind of becomes more good in this world. And thus it goes from being pink to being red. But it could be the opposite, because like the Crimson King is crimson, right? And that's something that we haven't really talked about. And I don't think I ever had a real need, or I didn't really ever feel a need to incorporate that into my theory. But like the Crimson King is red. And we're going to see later, there's like a pulsing red light in the distance associated with him.
Yeah.
Which I have to admit is confusing for my theory. Another thing that I noticed though is that crimson is like a specific shade of red. It's like a nearly purple red, actually. And roses can be a variety of colors, honestly. But when I picture a rose, I picture it being like red, like blood red. Which is distinct from crimson. So I don't know if that's a distinction worth anything. I don't know if a normal person is expected to be able to know, oh, that's red and that's crimson. I think they'd all just be red to me.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know. I admit my color theory is breaking down a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun talking about, though, because it is interesting that one of the big contradictions is we have this rose, this beautiful, flawless, perfect rose that represents all that's good and right and correct in the world, that represents the tower in some ways specifically is the tower. And then we have the Crimson King, we have our bad guy. And, normally just if you're creating two sides in a struggle or whatever, you'd want to define them differently, but King has chosen to define these two sides. Like, I think, the analytical brain of yours wants to be able to neatly divide these and say, okay, this is clearly a reference to the Crimson King and it's bad, but it makes you wonder, okay, so what's the rose? We know it's good because it makes it's everything feels good. Like it it is representative, as we've been told, of all good luck, all random chance and happenstance that leads towards goodness. So like, I don't think we're at this point supposed to be questioning like the goodness of the rose.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there is this kind of inherent contradiction here that makes you scratch your head. Okay, well, if he is the Crimson King, if that is his color, if that is what represents him, and we keep being told about this red rose, and more importantly, this every time one of our characters has seen the tower, there's been this field of red roses surrounding it. What does that mean?
Yeah, maybe the Crimson King sees himself as being, a good guy in his own mind, like he's the sort of good kind of villain where they think they're right, and thus they think like, well, the core of this universe is this rose, which is purely good, and I'm a good guy, so I'm going to make my whole theme be rose coloring because I don't know.
I like that. He is the king, right? We don't know what he's the king of, but
we don't know anything about it.
We really don't. No.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
he's basically this mystical force that's been working against our characters through other people for books and books. But yeah, like who he is, why we learn a little bit more about him this week, just a very little bit, but not too much.
Not much at all.
So Susannah Mio, armed with new information, finds the secret velcroed pocket in the bag, and inside of it finds a little ivory carving of a turtle. It's old, impeccably carved, and happens to look exactly like the turtle fountain she's currently sitting right next to. So more twins, more duality going on here, right? Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I thought the writing was fun surrounding the Velcro because Susannah's never really experienced Velcro, and so just the confusion of Velcro for a person who's never seen Velcro.
Yeah, and the callback to ZZ Top and Velcro Fly from Wastelands. Yeah. I love King loves being self-referential at times, and just getting to do that callback, I'm sure, just delighted him.
That was fun. One thing that I thought as soon as the turtle was revealed is to wonder whether the little magical turtle wasn't helping kind of shield Black 13 from, because like normally when people are like around Black 13, it's like bad for everyone. But I was like, well, maybe the presence of the turtle is positively influencing Black 13 in some way. Yeah,
that's fun to think about because it certainly does seem to have power, and it seems to be a power of the opposite variety. And they just found this bag lying on the ground in the vacant lot, picked it up, ended up putting Black 13 in this bag, and there is the turtle sitting there working its mojo and helping Susannah here.
Yep.
I want to talk to you about Susannah's reaction to like seeing this turtle and seeing its twin standing next to her in this giant statue. The text says, for a moment, her breath stopped, and her heart seemed to stop also. She went along from moment to moment through this adventure, sometimes even from day to day, without thinking much, but simply driven by events and what Roland insisted was Ka. Then something like this would happen, and she would for a moment glimpse a far bigger picture, one that immobilized her with awe and wonder. She sensed forces beyond her ability to comprehend. I love this because, like, you and I have had this working theory about Susannah and kind of her treatment of this whole quest, and then we see a passage like this that comes along and just seems to line up exactly with our interpretation of Susannah here. That she's just kind of going through the moments. She's not really hooked into anything, but then stuff like this happens, and it forces her to realign her perspective a little bit.
Yeah, going along from moment to moment, day to day, driven forward by events is, that's so in line with what we were saying. She's not really thinking about the destination. Roland thinks about the destination constantly. Eddie and Jake are clearly propelled by the thought of the destination, although they don't think about it that often. But for Susannah, it's just day to day, one damn thing after another. Just kind of, and the merest hint that there's something bigger, while the other three have this direct, vivid experience of that something bigger. They've all seen the something bigger.
Yeah. And Susannah is starting to see it, right? Like in this chance discovery of this turtle that happens to exactly mirror this fountain that's sitting right next to her. And suddenly it opens her eyes up a little bit. She hasn't had her moment of seeing the tower that every other character in this quartet was gifted, but things are working against her, or with her, whichever you want to. Things are working to open her eyes a little bit here,
but in a more subtle way, perhaps. It makes me wonder, like, I mean, we've mentioned before the idea that her theme might be faith. And so the longer it takes her to actually see this thing, the more faith is required.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also makes you wonder, like, what each character has a role in the story, right? And each character has a role with Roland and a role in getting to the tower. And perhaps Susannah's role just is not necessarily tower focused. Maybe her role is to have an effect on someone else in the group. And I'm just speculating out my ass here. I'm not hinting towards anything, but it makes you wonder those kind of things.
Yeah. Like whatever greater plan is in play doesn't, it's not making her obsessed with the tower because it doesn't want her to go there. Yeah. That's an idea. Yeah.
I mean, perhaps it's something just as simple as Eddie needs the tower to motivate him forward. Jake needs the tower to motivate him forward. Susannah does not need that. And that's obviously been true because she hasn't gotten it, and she's still here, and she's still with them, and she's still going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of possibilities.
Sure. But Susannah's awe at the bigness is interrupted by a Swedish fellow noticing the turtle figure. He seems allured by it, similar to the way people were entranced by Jake's key back in the Wastelands, as the book specifically reminds us. And I love this little bit here where she's looking at him kind of be entranced, and she's thinking, and she thought, Data Chuck, Data Turtle, don't worry, girl, you got the turtle. It was such a silly rhyme, she almost laughed out loud. I love it because, like, not only is it a silly rhyme, it's referencing the Lobstrosities from way many books ago.
Yeah.
Things that Susannah has never actually seen, by the way. Well, I guess she did.
Yeah.
How many of them did she see? I don't remember.
They were the ones, she blew away the ones on the beach that were trying to eat her friends, but
sure.
She was only recently Susannah then.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's, I think it has to be kind of the fact that they all think of it the same way, the Data Chuck, I don't know, way of writing it, if you will. It smacks of like Kef to me. So
yeah, I mean, and it, like, it's because the rhyme has nothing to do, like, the turtle has nothing to do with the Lobstrosities. Like, you would think, like, if she's going to make a silly rhyme about the turtle, it would be the rhyme that we've seen again and again about the turtle, enormous, like, see the turtle of enormous girth, on his shell he holds the earth, that kind of rhyme. But this is just almost a non sequitur to the point that it makes her laugh. And it's, once again, Stephen King being self-referential, going back and referencing his earlier books. There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Especially in these chapters.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've commented many times on how referential he is, with other books, with other books out there in the world, with other Stephen King books, and now here he's referencing other Dark Tower books. So that feels that kind of makes sense to me in a way.
Yeah, especially as we approach the end of the story, it's kind of connecting it all together a little bit. In serious ways, like I think these chapters bring an event back from the very first book to the forefront and make that event important to what's going on now, but in the small ways too, and in the little jokey ways. I like that he does it in both these ways. It's not just plot events, it's like everything. It's like the books are kind of melding together a little bit.
Yeah, it's not always momentous. This is lighthearted and almost meaningless, right? Like, I don't think there's any deep meaning to the fact that she calls back to the Lobstrosities here. Yeah,
no, I agree. It's just fun. But this Swedish man, who we'll learn is named Matheson or Mats, tells Susannah that her skoldpadda makes him very happy. This is just the Swedish word for turtle, by the way. But although the etymology of this, the word origin is shield toad, which is just the coolest thing in the world.
Yes.
Like scold and padda is just shield toad. That's way cooler than turtle. I love it.
I wish we had fun names like that in English.
Me too. It does strike me a little bit that, like, it sticks out to me here, Matt, that, like, we're 2 episodes into this book and we've had 2 Swedish words that have showed up here, like Hammarskjöld Plaza, and Hammarskjöld is the name of a Swedish diplomat, a very famous Swedish diplomat, and then skoldpadda is now a Swedish word for turtle. It's interesting, right? And there's all this Swedish stuff going on.
Yeah, I don't know, because there's some vague man. See, I'm not able to actually have the reference, but like there's some idea that like Calvin Towers people are not Swedish, but they are like, I'm gesturing vaguely
Dutch.
toward northern Europe, northern Western Europe, that area. Related. It's all related, Scott. You see?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Let's move on from that embarrassing little tangent.
I tried to help you out and you didn't take it. Calvin Towers Dutch.
They're Dutch, yeah. But how close is Dutch country to Sweden?
Dutch country, the Netherlands.
Yeah, they're close together, right?
I mean, relatively, yes.
Well, like, then I'm right.
The Netherlands is on the North Sea, I'm pretty sure, and so and Sweden touches the North Sea a little bit. Like it's Europe, so they're like close-ish.
Yeah. Well, according to the Mercator projection of the map, they're all extremely enormous countries. that are really close together.
The Netherlands is not a Scandinavian country, though.
Okay.
The Scandinavian countries are Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And
okay.
And if you say Finland Gets really mad because they're like, no, we're not. We are not. I don't think Amsterdam is considered a Scandinavian country, but it is like northwest part of Europe.
Yeah, I guess to be moderately more serious. I think I'm just noticing that there have been a surprising number of references to like cultures and people coming from, the cold latitudes of Europe.
Sure.
Although yes, these are definitely two separate cultures for sure.
I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, there's always been a lot of like Western European mythology at play in this story, right? I mean, like Roland is supposed to be a descendant of the line of King Arthur, right, supposedly. So that's always been a part of the story, and maybe he's just moving a little bit east.
Yeah.
But anyway, this Swedish man, is just as suggestible as that cop that wanted Jake's key back in the third book, and he obeys Susannah's every word as long as the turtle is in sight. But the interesting thing we see here, Matt, is the turtle doesn't just entrance them, it changes them. Like we see here, Matt starts talking differently. He starts talking like the Califocan. He starts talking like people of Midworld. He says, I listen to hear, Mistress sigh, and hear to obey. That gave her a nasty jolt, especially coming out as it did in Matt's cute little Scandahoovian accent. Scandahoovian. Oh, Stephen.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. So, and we see this again with the woman at the front desk, where like not only does it change the way she speaks and she starts speaking Midworld-ish, but she also starts speaking with knowledge that she couldn't possibly have. And so you wonder, like, what is this token channeling through these people that does this to them?
Yeah, it definitely seems a bit stronger than the key, and in a kind of an ominous way at times. I mean, so the key, the turtle leaves me feeling with a weirder feeling than the key did, because like kind of makes him a little Gollum like they want the turtle. They're not just listening. They want the turtle. They're heartbroken when they can't have the turtle. Mats literally calls the turtle precious. Uses the word precious. So like, I'm not reaching for the One Ring comparison here. And which is an ominous connotation. It's not a this is a purely good thing necessarily. And it gets even more ominous when we talk to the clerk in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing that stuck out to me here is that, like, this interaction with Matt's, like, basically Susannah tells him to go back to the hotel he's staying at, rent her a room for the next week, and then she ends the thing, like, saying, you're going to have a really good day, and your bowels will run like clockwork for the rest of your life. And even though he still wants little Maturin turtle, after all, his name is Mats, he says. I love that part where he's like, it is kind of mine. My name is Mats. It seems, I agree with you that like anything that like removes agency from a human being has a little icky ooky feeling to it, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like this interaction with this guy is so different from the way the woman at the front desk reacts, and it feels like they're coming from two different places. And so it makes you wonder, if it's something is being channeled through them, but also it is basing it off of who they are as people. Like I just think Mats is this like this delightful little Swedish man who's just like, just walking to work, and then he's entranced by this thing, and he helps her out, and she returns the favor by giving him clockwork bowel movements.
Yeah, he's adorable. That whole sequence is just delightful. It didn't really strike me as ominous at that point. It became ominous later, and then when I went back and read it, and I realized that he actually calls it the precious. Like he says it's precious. He doesn't call it the precious. For being precise,
that would be too on the nose for Stephen.
Yes, it would. But yeah, then I was like, okay, well, yeah, I think maybe there's something hinky going on. But he's just so cute and adorable that it's fine. You don't really notice it. I mean, I wonder, like, okay, well, she's probably not just done using the turtle, so she uses it again in the next week's reading. Is it going to be even darker and weirder? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know who put this here.
Yeah,
we don't know why they put it here, and we don't know who made it. So, I mean, like, I have to say, like, these questions, I think Stephen is intelligent enough to know that these questions are going to come up, and they could influence the way you read this situation. But I do think he constructed this one to be delightful, to be joyous, to be kind of silly. But he constructs the next one to be the opposite of that. And so, like, that leads me to believe we are supposed to walk away from this reaction being like, okay, that was nice. That was nice. She got what she wants. She solved her problem, and this guy's going to have a great rest of his day, and he's going to forget all about this turtle, and he's going to have a great day. And every time he doesn't have time to poop in the morning, he's just going to say the name of the turtle, and then he won't have to poop again till tomorrow. I don't know if that's healthy, but sure.
Yeah. And maybe he'll wonder why he knows that name, and who knows?
I mean, imagine like you're waking up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, and you're like, I gotta take a shit. Oh wait, but I got this call coming up, and then you just say the name of a turtle, and then you just take your call, and you just don't poop. So when you poop the next day, do you have 2 days worth of poop, or does the poop just disappear? This is important. We got to figure this out.
I would assume that you just hold it. Yeah.
So, like, what if you have what if you see a movie with a character named Maturin in it, and you just keep saying the name, and you don't poop for like a week?
So, I mean, that sort of sounds like a Stephen King plot right there. I was just assuming that this is like, the Rose is watching out for him and is going to make sure that he doesn't do anything stupid with the power. But maybe this is like, the thinner pie or something, where it's actually a horrible curse.
Have you watched Thinner?
How
do you know about Thinner?
I've watched Thinner, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've watched so many of these adaptations, then you like spout off random facts about Stephen King books, and I'm like, what?
I mean, I forgot that Thinner was Stephen King until like this conversation right now. So,
well, it's not. It's Richard Bachman. It was completely different.
Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, enough poop talk. So Susannah, Mio, which is just what I'm calling them from now on because it's easier than saying Susannah and Mia or just Susannah. They all head to the hotel to check into the room. On the way, I want to stop and talk about this for a bit because we have this brief bit where Susannah just like muses about what the future is like the way people dress in this era, the way women dress with their bellies exposed and wearing, sleeveless or spaghetti straps, and how the city just seems bigger, like it's just bigger, it's more active. I mean, this is 1999, right? So this is like in the heyday of the booming 90s, where the city grew incredibly. The city changed a lot in the 90s too. It became safer, it became more family friendly in some ways. It's big and loud and boisterous in a way it's never been before, and I love the moments where she just recognizes like how much, like, this is a woman who made her life the civil rights movement up until the events of these books. And now she's here 40, almost 50 years later, and she's kind of getting to see the fruit of the thing she was fighting for. She notices that the woman that she has the interaction with later is like this mixed race person that is at the front desk of a fancy hotel, and she like muses on how that would never have been in her time. And she says, the Dark Tower might be increasingly shaky, Susannah thought, and the world might be moving on, but she thought the lovely desk clerk was proof, if any were needed, that not everything was falling down or going in the wrong direction. And I love this little bit. I love that King gives Susannah this little bit.
Yeah, I like that this is what Susannah chooses to focus on instead of like noticing different computer technology or whatever, because this is what she would be thinking about. And it reminds us who she is. And it kind of also serves to remind us like the world is by and large good and worth saving, and there's good stuff going on. It's not all disaster.
Yeah, I like that because there's been this constant refrain of the world moving on, and Midworld is a place where everything is just steadily getting worse, right? It's steadily collapsing and slowing and dying. But our world, things are relatively better. I wonder how this book would look in 2020, but in 1999 things are going okay. And Susannah I love the little bit where she asks Mats like, are they going to have a problem with me? With a black woman in this hotel, and his response is, "Of course not." I think that's just perfect because it just shows to a character who has defined themselves by this struggle for civil rights, the progress that was made in the time that she was away. Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It's small. It doesn't really matter to the ongoing narrative of this story, but I love that King takes the time to give Susannah those moments because you're absolutely right. These are the things that would be most important to her. Mobile phones? No, she wouldn't care about that. That's not what she would notice people doing. The clothing? Yeah, absolutely. Noticing the way people dress? Absolutely. But also noticing the way in which, people are allowed to be at the front desk of a hotel or a black woman is allowed to walk into this hotel and no one says anything to her. Those are the things that are most important to her in her old life. And we give those little moments time to breathe. And I just love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So we also see that the hotel is going to transfer ownership soon. It will become another great Sombra/North Central project. Well, Matt.
They're everywhere.
They are everywhere.
I still don't know what the hell that is, but it's bad.
I think it's interesting though, because we know Sombra, right? We know Sombra is the company that Father Callahan had his run-in with that ended up with him jumping out of a window.
Yeah.
But North Central Positronics is the Midworld company, and they're here. They're doing stuff here now too.
Yeah. Interesting. For some reason, I know that they've been in Midworld this entire book. I just for some reason always thought of them as also being on Earth. I don't know why that is, but no, you're right. But they seem to be two different organizations because it's Sombra/North Central.
They're like teaming up.
Yeah, of course, it's not North Central Positronics because there's no such thing as Positronics.
Sure, it's just North Central.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. Other than being worrying, I don't know what to make of it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's what you're supposed to just be, is worried. Yeah. And I think it comes back into play when Susannah and Mia are having their conversation about, the end of things. And Susannah makes the argument. It's like, okay, yeah, well, technology ran amok in your world, but not in mine. And Mia's response is, oh, really? Who's the one doing the project in the hotel? You saw that sign. North Central. Yeah. That seems to be history repeating itself, is it not?
Yes, because this world is the past and Midworld is the future.
Okay. Honestly,
bringing it back.
I was literally baiting you to say this. Like, this is what this whole line in the script was about, was baiting you to bring that back. And I'm a little surprised it took this long to get there, Matt.
Well, I'd given up on it. It was dead and buried, but here we are with North Central. It's certainly a tempting explanation to say that this is the company that goes on to invent positronic computers and dipolar engines and whatever. No,
and Andy the messenger robot.
Yeah, all this stuff is in the future, and Midworld is the future, and or maybe it's some kind of Mobius strip type Ouroboros thing. I don't know, but I mean, I guess it's still on the table. Is what
there is a lot of timey-wimey shit we got to talk about this week. So yeah, it is a perfect time to bring this theory back, I think.
Okay, cool.
So Susannah goes in and talks to the front desk lady who demands some ID, but she uses the turtle to trick her into accepting a plate as a driver's license. Don't try this at the airport, folks. Don't bring up your sharp-edged plate and say, is this acceptable identification? And then you throw it at them.
Here's my passport.
Don't do that. Yeah. And this goes back to what we were talking about a bit, because while the interaction with the Swedish man was mostly goofy and pleasant, it does take a more sinister tone with this woman, because after she finishes the interaction, after she gets the card key to room 1919, the woman says to her, "When the king comes and the tower falls, sigh, all such pretty things as yours will be broken. Then there will be darkness and nothing but the howl of discordia and the cries of the canned toy." So this is ominous. We'll learn a whole lot more about what discordia is. This is like this woman saying the word discordia is the first time. Capital D discordia, by the way. I don't know if that translated in the audiobook when you first read it, but capital D discordia.
Yeah, I figured it was a proper noun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we'll learn much more about what discordia is in the next chapter. But I want to talk about this interaction a bit, and I want to again, it does seem like, with this goofy man, it was just this harmless thing, but something is channeled through this woman, something threatening and dangerous. And we don't really know what it is.
Yeah, I assumed that it was, either the Crimson King, the Crimson King's eye, the will of the Crimson King, or something kind of reaching through her, reaching his, his negative influence into this moment. But we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So Susannah is given the room 1919, as we said, because of course, and she has to hurry to get up there, Matt, because the longer Susannah controls this body, the less her legs seem to work, because they're not her legs, they're Mia's legs. And if Mia isn't in charge, then the legs stop working. But Mia doesn't want to come out because she's shy. Mm-hmm. And this is really the first of many beats that are going to happen for the next chapter and a half of King defining Mia as not, we talked about this last week, but I think these chapters go even further with it, that not this monstrous demon woman that is our enemy, but this meek, scared, shy, uncertain mother thrust into the situation and really doesn't have any idea what's going on either, and is just kind of like putting an image of who she wants to be out there to, she's trying to influence things. She's trying her best, but she's in way over her head.
A lot of what we saw of her in the nighttime castle was her explicitly using different voices and sort of calling up bits of Susannah to try on, almost as if she was shaping her personality or discovering her personality. And
I like that.
And which was really creepy and unnerving, but now we're learning her real core personality is something different than what we expected.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like it. So they head up to the room, dump some stuff in the safe. The password is 1999, of course. And then our palaver begins, and we end the chapter on this note. "How do we go there?" Mia asked indifferently. The black woman, who was now two women again, sat on the beds and folded her hands in her lap. "Like a sled," the woman Susannah part said. "I'll push, you steer. And remember, Susannah Mio, if you want my cooperation, you'll give me some straight answers." I just love the way this ends. The black woman who is now two women again is just kind of perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Susannah Mio is obviously the name that was written on the fence or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yes.
The fence, right? Which yeah. I didn't really notice when the Mio started being slipped in as opposed to Mia. Am I missing a reference here, or?
I think she's just channeling what was seen on the sign
okay.
there. I mean, it is interesting that this is Susannah talking, right?
Right.
"I'll push, you steer, and remember, Susannah Mio." She's talking, she is Susannah talking to Mia saying Susannah Mio.
Exactly. That's, I was just wanted to point it out, I guess.
Yeah. So we move into the next chapter and we move into the palaver. So the next chapter, the sixth stanza, is titled The Castle Allure. And I think this is probably one of the most important lore chapters we've had since we first learned of the Guardians of the Beam, right? This is a lot. There's a lot of information given here in Mia's palaver inside this Castle Discordia. There's a lot going on here.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, King really delves into some great descriptive writing in this part too, like of the scene, the environment they're in. I can't wait to dig into some of that.
Yeah, I know. It's really fantastic. Just great writing. Like, this is an exposition chapter, right? That's what this chapter is. It's mostly just exposition. What are the elementals? Whose baby is this? How does that work? What is going to happen? How is the Dark Tower going to fall? What is all this? Like, it's just filling us with information, but it is through this descriptive writing that I think this chapter elevates itself to something really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We find ourselves at the very end of the last chapter. Susannah kind of fell, right? She fell through the world, and she finds herself here on the edge of a parapet. She's legless again, but in what she calls a dog cart. And she looks over and she sees Mia, the real Mia, for the first time. And here's the description of Mia. She looked and saw a tall and comely woman beckoning her. Susannah's first look at Mia in the flesh astounded her because the chap's mother was white. Apparently, Odetta that was now had a Caucasian side to her personality, and how that must frost Odetta Walker's racially sensitive butt. I love this because, like, we know that Susannah's legs in New York are white, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is something, when she grew legs, they were white legs. And King said when Susannah originally looked down, she didn't notice they were white because, like, Susannah's power is to see, but she also has this really remarkable ability to not see the things she doesn't want to. And it's funny because I honestly had forgotten that continues through up until this chapter, because as her legs are failing her and she's like looking down and like noticing that they're not working as well, she still doesn't notice that these legs are white. These are not black legs. I think it's just wonderful that, like, it takes until she sees Mia standing by herself over here to go like, oh, she's white. And everyone else reading is like, yeah, Susannah, we know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, it's kind of fundamental to her that she keep these compartments up as long as possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also like the white legs on the black woman, I think, also just is a great visual for how divided her personality is right now. It's like she's literally two colors at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great image to really visually represent the divided nature of Susannah right now. And her reaction that Odetta Walker would be pissed off about this is perfect, because 100%, 100%.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm surprised we don't see Odetta Walker in this moment be like, yeah, this sucks.
Yeah.
Get this white chick out of me.
Yeah. Raging at her. Yeah. I do. It makes me wonder, like, well, I guess this is a more general question that maybe we could talk about, just at various times, but like how much of Mia was in the cards back in, the gunslinger, back in Drawing of the Three. How much did King plan to have a new side of a new side of Odetta that was jump in and have that be a white woman? I really wonder, how much of this was planned in advance.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that, a lot of kind of picking at that, is tied to who exactly Mia is, right? And we just don't have a clear answer on who Mia is. Was Mia created by Susannah? Did she create her in the same way she created Odetta? Or it seems like she came elsewhere.
Yeah, it seems
again,
like
she describes it as possession, right?
Yeah, she seems to have. Yeah, she seems to come from elsewhere. But we really, I feel like what we're told about her is misleading up to this point. So
sure. So Susannah looks off in the distance. She's sitting on this parapet and she sees, well, something. She looked out at the most fearsome, foreboding stretch of countryside she had ever seen in her life. Huge rock formations sawed at the sky and jostled into the distance. They glistened like alien bone beneath the glare of a savage sickle moon. Away from the glare of that lunar grin, a billion stars burned like hot ice. Amid the rocks with their broken edges and gaping crevices, a single narrow path wound into the distance. Looking at it, Susannah thought that a party would have to travel that path in a single file and bring plenty of supplies. No mushrooms to pick along the way, no pokeberries either. And in the distance, dim and baleful, its source somewhere over the horizon, a dark crimson light waxed and waned. Heart of the Rose, she thought. And then, no, not that. Forge of the King. She looked at it, at the pulsing sullen light with helpless, horrified fascination. Flex and loosen, wax and wane, an infection announcing itself to the sky.
It's Mount Doom.
It's Mordor.
Yeah,
it really is.
It is. Yeah, I knew we were going to Mordor. Totally is Mordor. It's great. It's such a beautiful image. I as you were talking, I mean, I'd already sort of painted this image in my mind, having read it before, but just you know, you saying it, I re-envision it with the stars and the bleakness of the landscape. It's great.
Yeah. A billion stars burned like hot ice. I love that sentence. And I love that she sees like this single file path, like, you know, this path where you have to bring a lot of supplies, almost as if to say, oh shit, that's our path, right? That is going to be our path eventually. We're going to have to go along that path, and and it's going to be rough. And I love, like, she's looking at this light, and her first reaction is to say Heart of the Rose, but she immediately knows that feels wrong. That, like, no, this is not the rose. This is not a light of the rose. This is something else. This is the Forge of the King, which Mia goes on to clarify a little bit later, who says, yes, this light belongs to the Crimson King. She says just the king, but we can make the assumption that it's the Crimson King because it's a red light.
Yeah. I mean, just to make the comparison more direct, like it's the Mount Doom is the forge of Sauron. It's the forge where he made the ring. So calling it the Forge of the King is a direct Mount Doom comparison.
So is the tower there over in the distance, Matt? Is that where the tower is?
For some reason, I don't think so, because I feel like we've seen visions of the tower a few times, and every time we see visions of the tower, there's not this red baleful light. There's the roses, there's the field of roses, but that doesn't feel the same as what's being described here.
Okay.
So I'd say no.
Okay. So where the hell are we then? Like, I mean, like, Susannah thinks it's close to the tower, and Mia also says it's very near where their quest will end for good or ill. So where are they?
I mean, somewhere in world, like closer to the tower physically. I mean, I'm sort of wondering now if the implication isn't like, it's not that they're close to the tower physically, it's that they're close to the tower like metaphysically, where they're, you know, on some other level of the tower that's one jump over for Midworld, but right under the tower, if you will. You know, I don't get the impression that the Crimson King like lives in the tower, or that he even has access to the tower for some reason. This is just a hunch, though. It's just like every time we've seen the tower, there's this hint of corruption or this like hint of threat, but there's no red light. There's no, it doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like this environment. Okay. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. So I love this part, though, where she looks into the distance and then manages to tear herself away before she's entranced. And Mia says, if you look too long, like, you'll jump off the edge of it. It's kind of, I think it kind of recreates the feeling that Eddie gets when he's taken over by Black 13. Remember when he says, like, I can fly, and then Susannah almost jumps, or Mia at least says that light, if you keep staring at it, will make you jump right off the edge of this castle. So she turns away from that and starts looking around at the castle itself, and the castle and the town beyond it all smell of death to her. And that's because, well, that's what happened here. Everyone's dead, and everyone died here long ago thanks to the Red Death. Poes' Red Death, actually. The Red Death, Susannah asked, startled and also frightened in spite of herself. Poes' Red Death? Like in the story? And why not? Hadn't they already wandered into and then back out of L. Frank Baum's Oz? What came next? The White Rabbit and the Red Queen?
That's a different book.
Yes. So as the text points out to us, this is indeed a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death, which is a short story Poe wrote. It's basically about a group of rich people that hole themselves up in a castle and an abbey to protect themselves from a plague called the Red Death. And then like some person dresses up in a costume of the Red Death and then goes around killing them one by one. So I don't know like how much like we're supposed to pull metaphor from that story itself, but I think it's just another instance of another mass casualty event that happened in this world that is also the name of a virus from a novel. Because we had the Captain Trips from The Stand. Now we have the Red Death from Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that story, so I'm not really able to dig into it. But I also made the Captain Trips comparison. Like, yeah. In fact, I even wondered for a minute. I was like, is she just being artistic here? And maybe it was also Captain Trips here. But I've no support for that, obviously.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah. This got me thinking, and I want to have a conversation with you about this, and I don't know how long of a conversation this is going to go, so buckle in, everyone. But I when I got to this part, I was starting to think about how King uses illusion in his novels, and all of his novels, but especially this one. And it's a really interesting thing, because like I think all artists and all novelists and all writers like allude to other stories. They all do it in some way, either directly or indirectly, or either consciously or subconsciously. Like you exist in this world having read hundreds of other stories, especially if you're a writer, especially if you were someone that loves story. You read hundreds and thousands of other stories, and they worm their way into your mind and they worm their way into your story. And whether you're doing consciously or not, everything you write is through that lens. And sometimes people do it consciously and make specific allusions, but Stephen King does it differently. And I think this is really interesting because, first of all, Stephen King could have written this and just had the Red Death, and then a reader that had read Poe would go, I know what that reference is. But Stephen King doesn't do that. He has his character say, like Edgar Allan Poe's The Red Death, that one story. And that is something he has done throughout The Dark Tower. You know, when we had Shardik, we specifically mention who wrote that. We specifically mention The Wizard of Oz. It's this really interesting way of framing illusion through his characters as not something that is a barrier to entry, that like you will only get this if you are a very literate person that is well versed in all the things of the time. Like this got me thinking about James Joyce's Ulysses a lot. James Joyce's Ulysses, which is a book that is a pain in the fucking ass to read, and it's a pain in the ass to read because not only is it a big story that is structured after the Odyssey, but it also like is constantly referencing things of his own work and things of the works of the time, and it's just really difficult to read if you are not up on famous literature of both the time and of the past, right? It is near incomprehensible, and it speaks in constant metaphor, and that makes it a tough read. That's not what Stephen King does. When Stephen King makes a metaphor, he usually says, hey, this is a metaphor. Like here's what it's a metaphor for, actually, especially in The Dark Tower, especially in this series where he literally has his characters aware of the references and point out the references when they see them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, absolutely right. It's textual that this is an intertextual text.
Yes. But I mean, so I started thinking about this, and the more I thought about it, the more it just like opened up this whole thing to me. And it's like the difference between what we'll call pop fiction and literature, right? Like Ulysses is literature, and it has metaphor and it has imagery, and no one fucking reads the book because it's really hard to understand. And Stephen King writes beautifully, but he also is not interested in like saying you're only going to get this if you have read The Wastelands by T.S. Eliot, right? He wrote a whole book that was borrowing heavily from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. You could argue that this entire series is borrowing heavily from a Robert Browning poem, Child Roll into the Dark Tower Came. And yet, the way he constructs these things, it's never reading that thing as required entry. You must read these books before you're going to understand the genius of what I'm doing here. He points it out to you. He lets you know. And I think that's such a different attitude. And it's inviting, and it's allowing people to come in and say, you might not get the full measure of this reference, but I'm going to frame it in a way where it doesn't matter if you fully get it. It will only enhance your understanding if you happen to go read that thing after the fact.
And it makes you curious too, because like this book got me to go read The Wasteland, and I'm like he's hinted just enough, by showing Susannah's kind of reaction of horror upon hearing about the Red Death. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to read this Poe story. I've enjoyed all the Poe that I've read, but I've never heard of this one. And so it's almost like he's introducing you to these classics and these other works and then giving you just enough of an enticement that maybe you'll go check that out on your own and then become even more enriched. And so I think that's a fun. He used to be an English teacher, right? So he's trying to trick the whole world into reading all these classics.
Yeah, but isn't like it's so much better for me to say, read this great book that also references like 30 other books and in a way that makes you want to read them, than it is to say, read this great book, and the only way you'll understand this great book is if you've read 30 other books.
Absolutely.
It is. And I don't have anything against James Joyce. I swear one day I'm going to get through Ulysses. I'm going to try real hard. Maybe we'll do a podcast. That's the only way I can get through this, is if you make me talk about it on a podcast. But I just think King's Way is better. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more fun and it's more inviting. And I think you're absolutely right that it gets people to read these books. I mean, we could have a whole show that is just Matt and Scott read and talk about the books that Stephen King references in The Dark Tower. Yeah. And like, that would be great. And it'd be fun. And we could have whole conversations about what these books are saying and doing. And then we could have like a fun thing at the end about how it relates back to The Dark Tower specifically. But I don't know. That seems so much more fun to me and inviting and less gatekeepy. Yeah, right. What's funny is that it always feels to me, and I admit this is sort of a unfair characterization, but it always feels to me when you read, I've never read Ulysses, but like when you hear Ulysses described, there's this part of you that's like, he's just showing off. He's just showing off how well read he is. I know that's not like necessarily a healthy way to see that. But the thing is, King is just as much showing off how well read he is, but it doesn't feel that way because he's like inviting you in, like you said. It's inviting. He's introducing you to it in a helpful way. Yeah, I mean, it's literally a difference between saying, "Oh, you haven't read The Wasteland," and saying, "Guys, there's this really cool poem, The Wasteland, and I like it a lot, and I'm going to find a way to talk about it in this book I wrote." Like those are it's both showing. It's both of them are showing off that I've read The Wasteland, right? Yeah. But the way you approach that is so fundamentally different. Yeah. And I mean, I think classic literature gets up its own ass in that sometimes. And I'm not, again, like, it's beautiful, beautiful books. Everyone should read classics. There's a reason why books become classics. They're usually like really good. Usually, not always, but they're usually just like really good books. But they're not the only books out there. I do wonder if in like the year 2350, there's going to be people talking about how the television show The Boys is pretentious because it assumes your knowledge of DC superheroes. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, everything is referential, but we live in, pop culture is weird because we just assume that everyone knows pop culture. It's pop culture. Yeah. I mean, that it does kind of bring all that stuff in another light, right? Like, because I mean, I think Ulysses was still probably pretty damn incomprehensible to people reading it back in the early 20th century. But yes, it's not referencing pop culture for sure. No. And it's also just like its stream of consciousness is designed to be incomprehensible. But I mean, it makes you wonder like how much of that, like I haven't read Dickens lately, but how much of this, like how much self-referential and pop culture referential stuff in old novels are we just not getting because we didn't exist in that time?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It may be impossible to answer that.
True. Yeah. I'm sure like a very good historian could like parse that. That'd be a fun project, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's my total tangent, but I love the way Stephen King does this. I love the way Stephen King says, "Hey, come with me and read this cool book about a giant bear," instead of saying, "You haven't read the Giant Bear book, eh?"
Yes. I love it. Yes. Thank you for sketching that out.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move on. There's this one part that I really wanted to talk about, because I think this gets you really into who Mia is. So Susannah and Mia are arguing as they do, and Mia gets upset with something Susannah says, and Susannah says, "I wasn't scolding, only asking." Mia made an impatient shooing gesture with her hands, as if to say, "Don't split hairs," and half turned away. Under her breath, she said, "I don't go to Morehouse or no house. And in any case, I'll bear my chap, do you hear? Whichever way the cards fall, bear him and feed him." All at once, Susannah understood a great deal. Mia mocked because she was afraid. In spite of all she knew, so much of her was Susannah. "I didn't go to Morehouse or no house," for instance. That was from Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. When Mia had bought into Susannah, she had purchased at least two personalities for the price of one. It was Mia, after all, who'd brought Detta out of retirement, or perhaps deep hibernation, and it was Detta who was particularly fond of that line, which expressed so much of the Negro's deep-held disdain for and suspicion of what was sometimes called the finer post-war Negro education. Not to Morehouse or no house. I don't know what I know what I know. In other words, I heard it through the grapevine. I got it on the Erie Dearie. I picked it up on the Jungle Telegraph. So this is, it's perfect because it's Mia channeling Detta. And so this all at once, Susannah understood a great deal. Like, she understands Mia now. It's this hint at who Mia is, that she is this amalgamation. She is whatever she was before, but combined with everything that is Susannah and everything that is Detta. And she's just saying these things without even realizing she's doing it. She's saying the saying without even realizing she's doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty fascinating, right? Yeah, I mean, Detta, this is what I mentioned earlier. It does seem like there's some bleed through. Mia, Detta, maybe even Susannah, kind of all bleeding through to each other. Like that moment earlier when Susannah showed all that anger at Henry. It seems like Susannah's whole conception of Detta is a lot more precise and fleshed out than it has been before. You know, we've been doing away with this idea that Detta is this rage monster that Eddie and Roland had to contend with, and now she's almost this like ally who's capable of, slow, calm analysis and argument. And here Susannah is sort of describing for us like the rationale behind Detta's frame of mind in a very, in very reasonable terms. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. How we're learning about Mia, we're also learning about Detta.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a fun thing for King to do, to turn Mia into this character. Like, she would have been so much more boring if she's just this monster, this demon. But she is just a person, and she's scared and unsure, and she has all the strengths and weaknesses of both Detta and Odetta / Susannah inside of her, and whatever else she was carrying with her when she came on board.
Yeah,
it's so good. Then Matt, a bomb is dropped. Mia tells us that the father of the child she carries in her belly is Roland Deschain himself, and she will name him Mordred, after the nephew of King Arthur that betrays him, and in some versions of the legend, mortally wounds the king. This is, of course, not without Arthur killing him first. Like, they fight, and Mordred wounds Arthur, and Arthur kills Mordred and then dies later. But Mia seems to have forgotten that part of the legend.
Well, she didn't go to Morehouse.
That's true, or no house.
Yep.
But how can this be, Matt? How the hell has this child Roland to the Mia's belly come? How?
I don't know.
I guess first, I just want to get your reaction to this because, like, I intentionally prodded you with this last week when she looks at the baby and sees Roland's eyes in it, and I kind of just went, it's like, Matt, what's that mean? What? Oh, Matt, what?
I mean,
what?
I think that in my head I was like, well, we're supposed to think it's Roland's kid, but I don't know how. And so
how could that possibly be?
How could that possibly be? And I certainly didn't think hermaphrodite demon. So yeah, I whiffed it. So
sure. Yeah. I don't think anyone expected you to get that, Matt. So that's fine. Yeah. So Mia starts to tell us a story. Once upon a time, all was discordia, but out of that prim, that over, rose the 6 beams and the tower that connected them. So this is our like origin story for the universe we're being told right now.
Yeah, we're connecting a lot of concepts together. It's interesting because prim is like a Midworldian word that we've heard before, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I don't remember what it means off the top of my head, but in this context, referring to it as, the blank slate from which everything arose, it reminds me of like prim as in prime, as in primordial, primeval, like the chaos from which everything else arose, which I think is in a lot of earthly religions, actually.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, it's kind of like out of discord, literally like discordia, discord. Out of chaos, there came order, there came existence, there came something. Out of the primeval soup.
Yeah. Although interestingly, the over is identified with the discordia. Normally we think of the over as being good, and discordia sounds like the kind of for some reason, discordia to me seems like the terrifying blackness between worlds that they touch on when they go Todash, where it's like lurking evil dark black things between the worlds. It's like, well, if that's discordia, that doesn't sound good. So I don't know. I think I have a lot of questions at this point.
Sure. But here's the myth here. Once upon a time, all was discordia, and from it, strong and all crossing at a single unifying point, came the 6 beams. There was magic to hold them steady for eternity. But when the magic left from all there is but the Dark Tower, which some have called Can Calix, the Hall of Resumption, men despaired. When the age of magic passed, the age of machines came. North Central Positronics, Susan murmured. Dipolar computers, slow trans engines. She paused. Blame the mono, but not in our world. No. Do you say your world is exempt? What about that sign in the hotel lobby? We talked about that before. But so basically, magic went away and man turned to machines. And instead of relying on the magic to hold up the beams, the old ones built machines to do it for them. They were great machines, but they were mortal machines. They replaced the magic with machines, do you ken it? And now the machines are failing. So despite the breakers working their way on the 2 remaining beams, Mia tells us that the tower is doomed to fail no matter what, because they replaced magic with machine, and they're accelerating it, but it's going to fall someday anyway, because man in its ultimate wisdom has, quote, replaced faith with rational thought. But there is no love in thought, nothing that lasts in deduction, only death in rationalism.
There's a couple of big things that jump out to me here. The first is the idea that there was magic enough to sustain everything for eternity, but then the magic left from everywhere except the tower. So why did the magic leave? And why did it not leave the tower? And I mean, something happened to make the magic leave. In other words, there was magic enough and it left. So that seems to me an important question. The second question is, that last thing that Mia said, there's no love in thought. There's only death in rationalism. So that has a strong implication that love is the key. Faith is the key, right? The machines can't do it, but maybe love can do it. Maybe faith can do it. Maybe it's not so hopeless as Mia says it is.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Those are kind of the big things I was hoping you would pick up on here. I mean, that sentence, there was magic to hold them steady for eternity, is really important. But I do think that the next part of that sentence is important as well. Magic left from all there is but the Dark Tower, right? So there was magic everywhere, and then the magic left except for in the tower itself. So if the tower is the center of the beams, then even if the magic was gone, would the beams still been able to hold themselves up without intervention by men?
I don't know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. I think.
I think this does kind of answer the question we asked last week, right? Where we were talking about Shardik. We were talking about this guardian that seems to be this mixture of bear and machine, right? Mm-hmm. That it seems like what has happened is here is that everything was magical. Everything was done through magic. And then at some point people said, mm-hmm. we got to do it. We got to build it ourselves.
Yeah.
So like maybe Shardik went away. Maybe the guardian Shardik went away when the magic went away. And they said, well, we got to have a Shardik. Mm-hmm. So just like they said, well, we got to build something to hold the beams up. If the magic's gone, we have to hold, getting broad and not being literal, but being more metaphorical. If magic is not going to be here to allow our world to continue, we must do it some other way. Mm-hmm. And so they built machines. And what has been one true through line of this entire series from the very beginning is that the machines break down, they go crazy, and they're nothing but trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, they turn into monsters. So
yes. Yeah.
I love it. I think I'm just right that there used to be like a real Shardik, but this was the fake Disneyland Shardik.
It seems something along that line.
And maybe there is a real psychic mega turtle somewhere in the cosmos. And maybe there's also a crappy robot turtle sitting at the opposite end of the beam. And that's a funny thought too.
It is indeed. So Susannah asks Mia outright, can nothing prevent the fall of the tower? Not even your gunslinger friend hopes to prevent it, Mia said, only to slow it down by freeing the breakers and perhaps slaying the Crimson King. Save it! Oh, delight! Did he ever tell you that was his quest? Susannah considered this and shook her head. If Roland had ever said that in so many words, she couldn't remember, and she was sure she would have. No, Mia went on, for he won't lie to his quartet unless he has to. 'Tis his pride. What he wants of the tower is only to see it. Then she added rather grudgingly, oh, perhaps to enter it and climb to the room at the top. His ambition may strike so far. He may dream of standing on its allure as we hunker on this one and chant the names of his fallen comrades and of his line all the way back to Arthur Eld. But save it? No, good lady. Only a return of the magic could possibly save it. And as you yourself well know, your din deals only in lead.
Oh, dear. It reminds me that the one of the earlier chapters was named "The Persistence of Magic," right? And the whole, that was just about the door, right? But it's not just about the door; it's about the whole everything. The whole everything is only maintained by the persistence of magic, and it's only falling because of the failure of magic. I guess it's the opposite of persistence. I don't know,
or more specifically, the reliance on machine.
Yeah. So speaking of this Roland, quote unquote, reveal here, it's interesting because I could have sworn that his goal was at the very least to prolong the existence of the universe, to fight against the moving on of things. I mean, there's the whole moment, the first moment when he sees the tower and it changes him and he says it will not stand, referring to like the corruption of the tower and all of that. That felt more momentous than just he wants to go stand on the top of it and say names. And so I'm not sure if Mia is being entirely fair to our dear romantic Roland. I mean, he has a couple of different sides to him, and this might accurately reflect one side of him, but I also think that it's maybe discounting the romantic side. It's also possible that she's exactly right, and I just don't want to believe that of our boy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is kind of yes and no. Mm-hmm. I think he has certainly talked about how the tower is falling, and if it falls, the universe will fall with it. But has he ever specifically said, so I must go to the tower to prevent that? In the deep recesses of his mind, Roland's drive has always been, I want to see what lies at the top of that tower. I want to reach the door at the top of that tower and open it and see what is there. Mm-hmm. Now, the other stuff is like he said before, like when he was talking to Ben Slightman, like these other things are useful excuses that keep you sleeping at night. But what is his core? What is at the core of him? To see what it is, to know what it is, to understand what lies at the top of it. Like I think obviously Mia doesn't like Roland very much, and Mia is not going to have a very charitable view of who Roland is. So I agree with you on that front. I think there is moments in this entire conversation, especially when we get to the other half of the conversation that Susannah is having with Detta, that call into question a lot of what we're learning here. Not specifically item by item, but like how much of what Mia is saying here do we take as fact? How much is fiction? How much is just lies that she's telling herself? Like we can't take all of this on good faith, but I do think it's important that we have this moment where Susannah responds to that and is like, no, I think you're right. I actually, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, definitely, I guess maybe what I'm getting from this is we are kind of meant to just take certain things at face value here, but not everything. I don't know. I don't know. I'm very suspicious of almost everything Mia is saying, and so it makes me suspicious of this characterization of Roland.
Sure,
but you're right. Like a big driver of his motivation is, to see if there is a God, if you will, to get to the top of the tower. Not necessarily because he wants to do anything, but just to know, like you said. Yeah.
So then Mia gets back to the topic at hand, which is, of course, the chap. You see, Matt, along with the 12 guardians of the beam, there are also 6 elemental demons, one for each beam, but each elemental demon has a male and a female side. And, well, the oracle that Roland banged back in the Gunslinger, that was the female version of one of these elemental demons. The same demon then went on to bang Susannah in the Wastelands, still carrying Roland's jizz or something, and bingo! Dino DNA. I need to hear your thoughts on all of this. I need to.
I mean, at first I was, surprised that it was the same demon, because I was like, with the distances and the times, but hey, it's magic, whatever.
It's fucking elemental demon.
Yeah.
Brah.
It's not something I saw coming at all. I think, the closest I got was, okay, the baby has Roland's eyes. Maybe it's Roland's baby somehow, but I have no clue how. The idea that it was a hermaphrodite elemental demon who is paired with the beam was not something that ever crossed my mind at any point.
I just can't believe you didn't just guess that. It's so obvious.
Yeah. It's like one of those riddles where as soon as you hear the answer, it seems really obvious. Hermaphrodite demon. Of course.
But I mean, this is great though, because like it ties into so many myths and legends, right? Like the son of the hero is the one that will destroy him, right? Mm-hmm. It's so epic. It's so mythological.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so fun.
She nails it by saying that it's going to be, she's going to name it Mordred. I still have my prediction that this baby is going to go back in time and be the Crimson King, or perhaps the Man in Black. One or the other. Okay. I'm leaning toward Crimson King. That's my Hail Mary prediction. Is that the right word?
Hail Mary prediction.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't know if this counts as a Hail Mary, but it's bold. It's bold and I like it.
Okay. Good.
So Susannah takes this relatively well, all things considered, but having learned this, she then tries to kind of shift the conversation to understand who Mia is. Where does she come from? Is she the elemental demon that banged both of them? It doesn't seem like it. And the truth here is that the truth of Mia is that she doesn't seem to actually know 100% who she is. And I think that's just delightful.
Yeah, it's so great. It really injects this big mystery into the middle of things, because it would be so simple if it was just like, oh yeah, she's the demon, she's possessing her. But it's like she's got knowledge from all these different places. She seems to be able to psychically talk to people. She has knowledge of ancient history and deep insight into Roland's psyche that other people don't have. And it's like, where does she? Well, why does she know this? Who? Yeah, it's a big, exciting questions.
Yeah, the huge, exciting questions. But what Mia does is because of this identity issues, because of this uncertainty of who she is, because of all this, she defines herself by her name, right? She defines herself as the mother. And so all she has is being the mother to this chap. And so Susannah realizes what's going on here and says to her, "You ain't nothing but the babysitter, girl." And she reacts violently to this. Like, this is not something she wants to hear. "No, I am not the babysitter. This is my child. This is, I have staked my entire identity on being the mother of this child, and that is what I'm going to be in." And we'll see by the end of this chapter the trouble that gets them into. But it's such a for this elemental demon possessed person, it's such a human reaction, right? Like when you are having identity issues, when you are having identity crisis, when you are not sure who you are, sometimes you just pick an aspect of your personality and say, that is what I want to be. And at least you can rest in the comfort of knowing, okay, well, I understand what I am now. I understand what my purpose is. And for Mia, her purpose is mother to the chap. And that is what she's going to define everything she does and everything she wants off of that one salient fact. And anyone picking apart at that, as both Susannah and Detta do, cannot be listened to, has to be rejected.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to take another. I'm just, having made that big swing, I'm going to make an immediate follow-up big swing and say that the reason why she's anchoring on to this identity of being the white woman carrying Roland's child is because that was what she was most recently. She was the white woman carrying Roland's child when she was burned to death, and is now reincarnated somehow.
Holy shit, man. You're swinging.
I'm swinging.
Swing away.
One of these is going to connect, man. So Mia is Susan is the new theory.
Mia is Susan.
Somebody's writing all these down, right? Because I'm not.
It's someone. Yeah. Well,
okay.
It'll be fine.
All right.
So while all this is going on, and it's this delightful moment where like one of the sections begins, this is what Susannah's demon said, and then we go through this whole story, and then we switch to another chapter, and it says, this is what Susannah's other demon says, that demon being Detta Walker, who is also talking to her. And one of the things Susannah and Detta Walker are talking about is trying to pick through Mia's bullshit, right? One of the things they notice is that Mia really can't read, and she's also kind of dumb. One of the other big things is she's pregnant here in Castle Discordia. Like, that's this big thing we don't understand, Matt, is that Susannah is pregnant, the baby is coming, but she's not showing, right? She doesn't look like she has a baby inside her, but wherever they are, whatever Mia, like whatever world this is or vision this is or what have you, here Mia shows as pregnant and ready to burst. And we don't really understand why. And both Susannah and Detta are like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we're not. I don't know if this is like real or if this is in her imagination or if those are the same thing. Like,
yeah, we do hear the Todash chimes at some point, so we can say maybe we're going Todash here. But how does that work? We don't know.
Yeah.
But I really like this part again. Susannah's thinking, so she's someone or something else as well. Someone from the invisible world of house demons and ill six. But who? Is she really one of the elementals? Detta laughed. She say so, but she lying about that, sugar. I know she is. So, like, we had this. We talked about this so much already, Matt. But this complex Detta, Susannah, Mia relationship here, like Mia is. Like this one line here, she's lying about that. So Mia is holding herself up as, yes, she is one of the elementals. She is a demon. That is who she is. And that is why she is here. But that's not true. Detta knows that's not true. And, once you poke at one thing, once you poke at one hole in one part of the story, you wonder how much of this is true, how much of what she said is true here. And I think like you get a feeling by the writing that it's not as if she's outright lying in a lot of cases, but perhaps she's just either mistaken or her perspective is coloring the truth in a lot of bluster, you know?
Yeah. Or just sort of like, well, I must be the elemental demon. What else would I be? Because she doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like, yes, the tower would absolutely fall no matter what, without the breakers. Like just this assumption that, I mean, it's the same kind of assumption that says, you know, your Roland will definitely fail. Like your quest will fail. Like it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
But before they can discuss this any further, the phone rings and Mia pushes them all out of their Toadash to Castle Discordia and back into the hotel room. Mia answers the call and a familiar person is on the line. One Richard P. Sayer of Sombra Corp. This is the guy who met with Per Callahan back in the 70s, remember? And Sayer references Odetta, not Susannah, Odetta, which makes Susannah real fucking mad. And I was curious what your reaction to that is. Like, once again, we see like this freak out from Susannah. And it is, to me, reminiscent of the freak out that Detta had when she was called Odetta.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that Susannah, well, I don't know. Like to me, you know, you always feel a kind of rejection and alienation from past versions of yourself that you feel were living under some kind of delusion or making some kind of terrible mistake or something like that. So like when you feel distant enough from old, you know, versions of yourself, you almost resent the fact that you are the same person. And maybe that's kind of what it is here. I mean, I admit that's more metaphorical maybe than what's happening here. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you here.
No, I like that. I mean, I wasn't asking for a definitive answer. It's something that really jumped out at me. I understand the desire to be like, I am Susannah. I am not Odetta. I have left that part of me behind. And then you can also make the assumption that perhaps part of this is the Detta part of her influencing her, because this does seem like a very Detta kind of freak out.
Yeah.
And I like this thing that Richard P. Sayer says here, where he says, "Don't call me Clay no more. Clay my slave name. Call me Muhammad Ali, right, Susannah? Or was that a little after your time? A little after, I think. Sorry. Time can be so confusing, can't it?"
I mean, so first of all, he reminds me a little bit of the Man in Black with these kind of, you know, references.
Yes, exactly. References that only he would understand. He and us, the reader.
Yeah. But also like the extra layer of saying, oh, it's a time travel joke, right? Because like, I mean, there's an implication here that he's old hat with this time travel stuff too, because he understands completely that she has skipped over all these intervening years. That's the implication, right? It's totally a clear implication that he knows where she's from, and he knows that she has no idea who Muhammad Ali is, despite the fact that it's 1999. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems to know everything about her, and he knows about Odetta and Detta and Susannah. Like, he knows all of this. Yeah. So Sayer promises Mia that she will get to look after little Mordred for at least 5 years or a little more, which is totally not a lie, Matt. It's not a lie at all. He's totally being honest with her. Totally.
Yeah. These vampires seem like a patient and sentimental lot.
Yeah, totally. He then tells her to head to the Dixie Pig, where they'll be waiting for her, which shouldn't surprise any of us because that's that old poem. Susannah Mio went to the Dixie Pig in 99. I actually love that, like, in the next chapter, Eddie is like, he just kind of says, Susannah's probably in 1999. And like, sometimes I love how Stephen King just like he just allows his characters to know what you, the reader, are thinking as well. Like, well, there was that big poem on the wall, and so obviously he's right there. Like, and it's just like, it's almost as if Eddie is a reader of the story, right? That he just like, in real life, you don't see a sign written on a wall and like immediately assume it must have some importance to the future events of your life. But in the Dark Tower, all the stuff certainly seems to, and Eddie gets that now. And so he's like, where could Susannah be? Oh, well, obviously she's in 1999.
Yeah, she parked her rig, which I don't know what the rig is at this point, but we'll see.
Her body?
I guess. I assume she's going to get like a big, like 18-wheeler.
Sure, Matt. Point. I think you're being a little too literal here.
Yeah. One of those battle wagons from, yeah.
So we conclude our chapter, though, with Sayre having some more news for Susannah. He tells her there's an ambush about to happen out in Maine, 1977, and Susannah's about to be a widow. She realizes the only way the enemy would know about the door in that location is if Mia had told them herself. Mia has betrayed them, Matt. Or, well, I don't know if it counts as betrayal. She ratted.
Yeah, she told them.
Yeah. I love the conclusion to this, though. I'm sorry, Mia said. I have to take care of my chap. Every hand is against me now. That's not true, Susannah said from the locked room where Mia had thrown her. And where was it, really? In the deepest, darkest dungeons of the Castle of the Abyss? Probably. Did it matter? I was on your side. I helped you. I stopped your damn labor when you needed it stopped. And look what you did. How could you ever be so cowardly and low? Mia paused with her hands on the room's doorknob, her cheeks flushed a dull red. Yes, she was ashamed all right, but shame wouldn't stop her. Nothing would stop her. Until that was, she found herself betrayed in turn by Sayre and his friends. Thinking of that inevitability gave Susannah no satisfaction at all. You're damned, she said. You know that, don't you? I don't care, Mia said. An eternity in hell's a fair price to pay for one look in my chap's face. Hear me well, I beg. Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah, Mia is shown to be so sympathetic and powerless and desperate that you kind of start to pity her at this point, you know? Imagine that after she was so terrifying just recently. You actually come to pity her now.
I agree. And Susannah almost has a moment of pity for her and then she pushes it away. But I think we, the reader, can have that pity. Like, I do. Like, she's obviously getting manipulated and screwed over by these people. Like, there's like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there's no fucking way these people are going to let her keep her kid, right? There's no fucking way. Like, they're manipulating her. They're fucking her over. They're liars.
Yeah, they're vampires.
Yeah. Well, and no, I don't think they're vampires and low men and whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Else those things are.
Yeah, they're monsters. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They're bad dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. Just a few chapters can really turn you around on a character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's some fun time travel stuff, though, Matt. Sayre says to Susannah in the year 1999 that there's about to be an ambush and her husband's about to get killed, but that happens like 22 years ago.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So hasn't it already technically happened?
Time travel's weird, man. I mean, it's entirely possible that he doesn't actually know the result of that yet. Also, here's one thing that I don't know how to even approach talking about. Like the fact that I'm still not sure whether this is the same Earth. Like, is this, let's call it Earth Prime, whatever Earth has the rose on it. First of all, assumption one, there's only one Earth with the rose on it. There's only one New York City with the rose in it. Okay. Then question, is this that Earth? I think so, because Damascus woman heard the singing of the rose. So, but we don't actually, but like, it has to be the same Earth, right? I'm working through this in real time. It has to be the same Earth. So I don't know, man. Time travel's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk in the next chapter a little bit about how Eddie's Earth is different from the Rose Earth, possibly.
Eddie's Earth as in the one that he goes to, or the one that he's from?
The one that he came from.
Yeah, the one that he came from. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, it's a lot of confusing stuff. This book's weird, man.
For sure.
I warned you.
Uh-huh.
So let's get into it. Let's get into our action chapter. We are on the 7th stanza titled The Ambush, and it's time to head into our action-packed chapter as we cut back over to Roland and Eddie as they walk into Maine in 1977 and into the titular ambush. Eddie smashes his head against the pane of the door as he comes flying through it, knocking himself senseless. But fortunately, Roland's eyes don't have the dry twist that his hands do, and he catches the glint of a barrel of a gun just in time to avoid a shot. Matt, I always kind of don't have a lot to say about the action scenes in these books, but just generally, Stephen King can really write some fucking action scenes, right?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's electric.
It is.
I have a hunch that Eddie clocking his head on the door frame is what saved him here. So there's Ka making sure that he survived.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise he'd be standing up and shot probably. So
could be. Yeah, he'd be slower than Roland. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I love the writing here. A limber whip crack of a sound came from behind and slightly to the right. The shooter was close enough for Roland to feel confident that if he had heard the sound of the shot, the man with the rifle had already missed. Something passed within an inch of his ear, making its own perfectly clear sound. Mizzz! The glass in the little mercantile's front door shattered inward. A sign which had been hanging there, "We're open, some come in and visit," jumped and twisted. It's like just a chapter of this. It's just a chapter of this like perfect onomatopoeias mixed with wonderful adjectives and propulsive writing that just makes the action so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always fun when you're in Roland's head during a gunfight because his like enormous experience gives you this sense of like, yeah, it's realistic that he'd be able to deal with this ridiculous situation. Of course, it's Roland.
He just catches a little glint of light and out of the corner of his eye, and it's like only a gun barrel could show that.
It's an ambush, yes.
Yeah, it's perfect. So Roland drags the still not entirely conscious Eddie into the general store and finally gets him to snap to attention. And I love this, Matt. Eddie's visible eye cleared. It happened fast. Roland saw the effort it took, not to regain his wits, but to regain them at such speed and despite a head that must be pounding monstrously, and took a moment to be proud of Eddie. He was Cuthbert Allgood all over again. Cuthbert to the life. And then, I mean, it's perfect because he once again compares Eddie Dean to Cuthbert, which is something he's done again and again and again throughout the story. But then in this ambush, Eddie like starts to fight and notices he's against Balazar's goons. And we have this great moment where like, Ka is a wheel, they say, and here's Roland and Eddie at another ambush against these same gangsters that they fought books and books ago. But then to Roland, it reminds him of Jericho Hill, which is when Cuthbert died, and he's just compared Eddie to Cuthbert.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. Like the last chapter ends with Sayer basically saying, "Hey, we're going to ambush your husband, and like Roland might live, but your husband's fucked." And so like, I think King planted that and then is just having a lot of fun with us throughout the entirety of this action sequence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so wonderfully set up. And yeah, I mean, the repetitions really work for me here. The idea that like, oh, this has happened again, and it was bad last time. It really makes you worried.
Yeah, so a man in a flannel shirt, which we will later learn is named John Cullum, seems to react quicker and smarter than any of the civilians in the store, and he helps the two gunslingers out back. As they're moving to get out of the store, Eddie gets shot. Matt, Eddie gets shot. A darning
needle. Yeah,
a darning needle. What's a darning needle?
Darning his socks in the morning.
I have to look up the word darning now. It's a sewing technique.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Learned something new. A darning needle of heat suddenly tore through his arm, and Eddie shouted in surprise and pain. A moment later, another punched him in the calf. His lower right leg exploded into serious pain, and he cried out again. So we were just talking about what King did at the end of the last chapter. Sayer indicating that, okay, they're going to get ambushed and like maybe Roland will survive. But Eddie Dean, he doesn't have the skills to survive this thing. Eddie Dean's dead no matter what, says Richard P. Sayer. And then suddenly we're in the middle of this battle. Eddie hits his head. He's zonked out. Eddie gets compared to Cuthbert, and this battle gets compared to Jericho Hill. And then Eddie gets shot. And suddenly in the middle of this battle, we're like, wait. Eddie can't die, right? and like, we're forced to be like, fuck, maybe Eddie can die. Maybe Eddie's going to actually die here. And I think that's like, I think Stephen King recognizes that this is book 6 of 7, that this is a long series, that we've been reading about Eddie Dean since the 80s. And he recognizes that the readers are going to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder about your main characters, right? Like if you didn't prime a reader that one of your main characters was in actual danger, maybe the suspense of the scene wouldn't have worked as well. But he takes the time to set up Richard P. Sayer says that he's going to die. Susannah is basically like at the end of the chapter, she's distraught. She's like, what do I have to live for now? Eddie's gone. There's nothing. I have nothing. And like all this stuff goes into make this moment feel like, fuck, he's going to die. He's going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great moment. And also outside of the moment, I mean, because once you know that he survived, or that he's probably going to survive, it's raised the stakes, and it showed us that the characters aren't invulnerable, which I think is something that it can be important to do as you kind of move into the final act of a long story. Like I don't think I had any concern that Eddie would die fighting the wolves. Basically zero concern about that. Eddie was fine, Susannah was fine, Jake was fine, Roland was fine. They were all going to survive the wolves. I was concerned about other things. There were other stakes, right? Not Eddie's safety. Now things are much more dire. We're moving toward the end of the story. And so King is saying, hey, you need to be concerned about this. You need to be concerned about the mortality of your main characters, your main cast. And you know, 2 gunshot wounds is pretty serious. Like arm and a leg. I mean, real hard to be an effective gunfighter with a bullet wound in the arm and the leg. He kind of gets through the rest of this fight because of, you know, adrenaline and the freshness of the wound, but he's unless there's some magic healing on hand, this boy is out of the fighting part of the story for a while. Well, I did wonder if this counts as the Frodo getting bitten by Shelob and almost dying moment, which I sort of. I mean, I'm still liking my comparison there, that like they've gone through the tunnel in the mountain, and now at the very least, Susannah has visited Mordor. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still worried about Eddie though. Like I don't feel like he's out of the woods. Okay, let's just wait because we're going to talk about that in a second.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So they make it outside and continue picking off goons as Mr. Flannel Shirt John Cullum continues to help them. He starts pumping some of the diesel gasoline towards the general store to turn it into a death trap. And once again, we have this moment of just wonderfully descriptive writing from Stephen King here. It has Eddie like stopping in a moment in time. All he was aware of was a clarity he had known only once before while riddling Blaine the motto. It overwhelmed everything with its brilliance, even the pain in his lower leg, where the tibia might or might not have been chipped by a bullet. He was aware of how funky it smelled back here, rotted meat and moldy produce, a yeasty scent of 1,000 departed brewskis, the odor of don't-care laziness, and the divinely sweet fur perfume of the woods just beyond the perimeter of this dirty little roadside store. He could hear the drone of a plane in some distant quadrant of the sky. He knew he loved Mr. Flannel Shirt because Mr. Flannel Shirt was here, was with them, linked to Roland and Eddie by the strongest bonds for these few minutes. It's just a beautiful, beautiful paragraph there. Like it's once again Eddie channeling the gunslinger nature, and focusing on this moment, on this now. And I like my favorite part is like John Cullum. We don't even know his name yet, but he knew he loved Mr. Flannel Shirt because Mr. Flannel Shirt was here, was with them. This bond of action and necessity. And I think, you know, to go back to Mia's conversation, like love is becoming something that is seeming more and more important, right?
Yeah.
And so the love that connects these two characters with this random guy seems more important now.
Yeah. This moment of sort of like love and joy and transcendence in the middle of, you know, this violent battle. The kind of the joy of taking meaningful action. It's a great moment. I agree.
Yeah. So Eddie kills George Biondi again, but in the past. So it's a different. Fuck.
Well, the past, sort of, right? Or because like that had to be a different George Biondi. That had to be a George Biondi from Eddie's level of the tower. You know, there's interesting questions here because the original Eddie came from 1987 and would have been just a kid at this point in time, which should be 1977, assuming no time slippage or other weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, if it's too much later than that, then their whole we must have Calvin Tower sell us the lot before the deadline plot is kind of thrown up in the air.
I'm just assuming.
I mean,
yeah,
it is true that the book has not specifically told us what time, where, when, like the when of where we are. But we do know that like the door, they specifically opened the door on the last two places they went, and the last two places they went was when Susannah went to 1999 and when Callahan went to Maine
in 77.
In 77, yeah.
70
is it 77 or 78? I don't know. Somewhere around
I
there.
might have mistyped, but I think it's 77 because I did literally search through the book to make sure that I had all these dates right, because it's actually becoming pretty complicated. Because I forgot, like I was like, wait, when did Eddie come from? Is this like because I was like, is it possible that we could like run into another Eddie from this dimension? And I think it is possible, but he'd be a kid is the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
He'd be a little older than Jake.
I mean, in fact, there's an Eddie, there's a Jake, there's an Odetta somewhere in this world, right? Probably. I mean,
maybe, yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't there be, right? There's a George Biondi, so
yeah,
I'm
Jack Andolini.
Yeah, there's exactly. And I don't know if this is relevant, but I was just noticing, Stephen King had just published The Shining and was working on The Stand in 1977 in Maine, which is where they are. So
there's Matt. Why does that matter? That doesn't matter.
I don't know, man. It's probably nothing.
I love that we see, though, in this fighting, like, once again, we're in Eddie's point of view, and we see how happy fighting is making Roland. Like, once again, this recurring beat of Roland is at his happiest when he's killing, when he's shooting. He's grinning, he's laughing, he's talking shit to Jack Andolini. He's being alive, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like Roland is at his happiest when has his gun out firing it at people.
Yeah.
And the book's reminding us of that fact in this moment.
Yeah. It's good to see him smile, even if it is because he's shooting people.
Yeah, I love this part right here. He was now suffering finally the ills an old man could reasonably expect, but he had a quartet to protect again, and not just any quartet, but one of gunslingers, and they had refreshed his life in a way he never would have expected. It all meant something to him again, not just the Dark Tower, but all of it. That's encouraging, right? That's a little encouraging moment from our protagonist here.
Yeah. That's downright hopeful.
Mm-hmm. And so there's this other moment here where Jack Andolini is saying, "Where's Tower? Give him to us, and we'll leave you and the other guy alone until next time." Sure, Eddie thought, and remembering something Susannah sometimes said in her best growling Detta Walker voice to utter disbelief. "Also, I won't come in your mouth or get any in your hair." So this is actually a quote that Detta Walker says to Mia at the end of last chapter. Uh-huh. Like when Sayer says that she'll get to keep the baby and raise him for 5 years, Detta like surprisingly comes forward just to say that out loud and laugh. And so like
it's so wonderfully crass. I love it.
It's so wonderfully crass, and Eddie is saying it here, and Eddie also thinks about the Morehouse and No House quote in this chapter as well. And it's like the ways in which the quartet are like maybe unknown to them communicating to each other through decades at this point is just delightful, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like Detta is a part of him as well in this moment.
Yeah. It's great. So they manage to hold off Jack and the rest of his men long enough to escape with John Cullum, who leads them into a little motor boat and off to the other side of a nearby lake. While escaping, Roland thinks about something we've talked about before, how this is the, quote, true world, the one where time always ran in a single direction. What do you think about this, Matt? What is the true world?
Just, I mean, we got the rose here. It is interesting. I mean, no clue. Sigh is the answer, really. But I mean, it's the world with the rose that makes it special. Do other Earths have roses? I sort of don't think so. I don't know that that's the case, but I feel like no. I must admit, I've never really been clear on like which doorway visits and which toe dashes and which other sorts of metaphysical jaunts have been trips to this Earth versus some other Earth. Like, unless you see the rose, how do you know if you're on Earth Prime or not? But this one has the rose. There's also something true about Midworld, right? Like Midworld, first of all, still open question whether Midworld is like another Earth or what exactly. But Midworld seems like Midworld's the only world with the Dark Tower in it. Like there's no point on Earth that has the Dark Tower on it. You have to go to that specific world, that specific plane, Midworld, to find the Dark Tower. At least that's my understanding right now. So like, in some sense, these two worlds have to be, important and critical and unique. I'm just sort of saying things. I don't like this doesn't add up to an answer of like, why is this the true world? What's special about it? Other than the rose being there, I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah. That's you're not supposed to know. So like, I'm not like, it's not like you've missed something. If you've missed something, I would gladly tell you here, but yeah, this is just kind of an open question.
Sure.
Roland believes it to be true. We have no reason to doubt him in this moment, but there is something unique about this world. I mean, we knew that, like, even in the last book when they talked about how if they miss the time to get the tower or to get the vacant lot with the rose on it, that's it. Like they missed their shot. There's no, like, they're sitting here in front of a door that can go to any time and any place. But the truth is that in this world, in this existence, for whatever reason, time only goes one way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it specifically says, yeah, you can go to the future all you want, but once something happens, it has happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's no going into the past again. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that we don't know why or how, or we don't know. We don't understand any of that, but we know that's to be true. Whatever world they are in right now, that is the truth.
There's an interesting implication there that the present is 1997 right now. 1977 right now, and Susannah is in the future. Because there's an objective present. I don't know, man. It's so confusing.
It is. And then we have to talk about this delightful bit of Stephen King-ism. So they're climbing into the boat, and it says, Eddie got in. Roland paused for a moment to tap his throat 3 times. Eddie had seen him perform this ritual before when about to cross open water, and reminded himself to ask about it. He never got the chance. Before the question occurred to him again, death had slipped between them.
God damn it. Well, this is why I'm still worried about Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
And the wording of that is quite bad because he never got the chance. It's not the next time it occurred to him. So death is not permanent in this world. We know that, or it can be not permanent. We have examples of people who come back, but I don't know, man. This seems bad. I did predict that Eddie would die a few episodes ago, so I don't want to be right about that. Of course, that's the fun thing about writing is that it could be Roland who dies.
Right. It's delightfully vague here.
Yes, exactly.
All we know is death slips between them.
Yes.
Or
some other interpretation of that word. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like it's there's 1,000 different, but it makes you do the thing you're forced to do, which is just say, God damn it, Stephen.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And so like, it's wonderful because it's him showing his hand, but like, he's only showing the top card. So you can't see what actual cards he has. You just see, okay, he's got an ace, but
yeah. Right.
But what are the other 4?
Yeah.
That's it's important. I love it. I love it. And I hate it because like, is Eddie going to die? Is Roland going to die? Who is this someone else? Some other death? Like, is there going to be like, are we going to take this literally and say like the embodiment of death is going to prevent them from being able to speak with each other again? What?
Yeah.
And I know the answer to this question, Matt, and I'm still like, what?
Oh man. Yeah, that makes me want to keep reading.
It does certainly pull you forward, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it? So the boys finally properly meet John Cullum, and when Eddie shakes his hand, something weird happens. He almost connects with Susannah for a moment and learns that yes, she is indeed in 1999, and she's been properly locked away by Mia. She's kidnapped. She She can go to her Dogen again, but Mia's locked her out of the controls. She has totally removed both Susannah and Detta from any control of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens while he's shaking hands with John Cullum, and he doesn't understand why, and neither do we.
Yeah. I guess this is only the second instance that I can think of, but like psychic zaps coming in out of nowhere for no apparent reason in this week's reading.
Yeah, there's a lot of when not to give away the book too much, but like the book kind of like stopped and said, who's this guy, right? Like they have this chance encounter in this convenience store in the middle of an ambush, and there's two women in there, and they get mowed down and killed because they don't listen. There's the owner of the store named Chip, who like listens, but he's slow to react, and like he's kind of a pain in the ass, and he's just whining and confused the whole time. And then there's the Mr. Flannel Shirt, John Cullum, who is calm, who is collected, who helps the boys out, who leads them away into the boat and is taking them to his house. He just seems important. He seems relevant, and so like the book like continues to stop to like have our characters marvel at how collected he is and how helpful he's being. Eddie loves him because of his connection in this moment, and then we get this weird psychic moment where he shakes his hand and channels Susannah a little bit here. And so like the book is kind of like flashing signs like John Cullum seems important.
Yeah, right. He's like a weirdly competent, interesting person for sure.
Yeah.
We're gonna learn more about this guy.
It's like if you're watching a TV show and your characters meet a new character, but he's played by like a really famous actor. And so it's like, okay.
I knew exactly where you were going with that as soon as you said TV show. Yeah. It's Kevin Bacon. That's weird. Yeah, right.
I'm sure he's just a cameo. And,
all right. He's just going to help us cross this river, and then we're going to be done with him.
Yeah.
That's great.
So John does recognize that something's odd about these two boys, and he asks them if they're walk-ins, and they're like, what? And John explains, walk-ins are people who just appear. Sometimes they're dressed in old-fashioned clothes as if they came from ago, I guess you'd say. One was naked as a jaybird, walking right up the middle of Route 5. Junior Angstrom seen him. Last November, that was. Sometimes they talk other languages. One came to Don Resford's house over in Waterford, sat right there in the kitchen. Donnie's a retired history professor from Vanderbilt College, and he taped the fella. Fella jabbered quite a while and then went into the laundry room. Donnie figured he must have taken it for the bathroom and went after him to turn him around, but the fellow was already gone. No door for him to go out of, but gone he was. So we got a new term here. We got walk-ins. Let's talk about these walk-ins a bit, Matt. It seems like, I think John Cullum says the last 2 to 3 years, they've been appearing all around this little town in Maine that they're in, all different like times, all different types of people speaking different languages. John Cullum has never like talked to them, but he has seen one at a distance before. But it just seems to be like a way of life in this little town, that there's just weird people that show up and they don't know what for.
Yeah. So I figured some of them might be like Todash and Manny, or perhaps there's a Thinny around here and people are stumbling in from various other times and places or dimensions. I also wonder, like, if this is the true world, maybe this is the world where other worlds tend to leak into this one. Like this world is sort of a hub. And so this world in particular would be having more interdimensional fuckery than your average world, because sure. It's the true world. It's the destination. It's sort of the default destination world. But yeah, it's interesting. And then I love how he asks them if they're walk-ins, and they're like, well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, based on your definition. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the chapter ends. Our two gunslingers head with John Cullum back to his place. They say they're looking for a person named Calvin Tower, and he's going to try to help them find him.
Cool.
And that's how the chapter ends. It was an interesting episode this week, Matt. I'm just kind of thinking back over the last 2 hours, and I feel like this is one of those episodes where the chapters ask a lot of questions but don't answer a lot of them. And so our conversation was very much me saying, Matt, what do you think about this? And you saying, I don't know, I think it's this. And me saying, okay.
Yeah. Right. Or me saying like, could be one of these four things or something else. Which I mean, it's fun to talk about. But yeah, we're in a weird part of the story, I think.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of I think it's not a spoiler to say a lot of the things we're ruminating on here are going to be answered. Some relatively soon, some not quite yet. But there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I want to keep this episode in mind when we get further into this book, because like there's a lot of stuff that I think there's a lot of things King is doing here that doesn't seem to make sense, but is gonna line up really nicely here pretty soon. And I'm very excited for it.
Awesome.
So soon.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Me too.
All right, folks, that is the end of our reading for this week. Next week, we are going to continue the book by reading 2 additional chapters. We're going to be reading stanzas 8 and 9. It's going to be, I think, our shortest reading of the book. So sorry about that, Matt. But
that is horrible.
It's the way the cookie crumbled, man. There's only so much you can do.
All right, fair enough.
So let's move on to our discussion question from last week. Last week, we asked our audience, what is your favorite power in a King novel or otherwise? Because we finally learned what Susannah's power was. And so we just wanted to talk about powers a little bit. And we got a lot of great answers. So let's go through them as quickly as possible.
All right. SNABJ94 says, I haven't read a lot of Psy King's books that involve powers, but one that I thought was intriguing and I kind of wish we got more info on was Evie from Sleeping Beauties. I know that novel is on the lesser loved side of King's works, but it was still an interesting read nonetheless, one I will eventually go back to. Another favorite power from something non-Stephen King would be Skitter from Worm. And they say, I'm not so subtly trying to pepper in more Worm answers in the hopes of turning other tower junkies toward it. Not sure how much info to give on her power. I also don't want to get into spoiler territory other than the fact that she can control bugs. It's one of my favorite powers, where you can be told about the power and automatically think, well, that's a lame ass power. What the hell can you do with that? But what she is able to do with it provides for what I would have to say is the best story involving superheroes I've ever heard of. Well, I happen to agree. So there you go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I said about that power very early on in reading Worm was this. It's so useless except for when it's really useful.
Yeah, except for all the cool shit.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauties it's definitely not my favorite King book. It's the one you probably don't know this, Matt, but he wrote this book with his son Owen. So Stephen King, so he has 2 sons that are both writers. Owen King, and then his other son, who does not go by King, who goes by the name Joe Hill, but also looks exactly like Stephen King. And I think it's funny because he's corroborated with Joe Hill before, but I think it's like Owen was like, yeah, I'm taking this name, and Joe's like, nah, I'm doing something else. It's really interesting. He's worked with both of his sons. I find it really adorable. Yeah. They're just a family of writers. Even his mother Tabitha, Stephen King's wife, is a writer as well.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Fast Randall says, I'll try to keep it vague because I know y'all are planning on covering in the future, but I love the powers in Insomnia. I love that the powers are connected to sleep deprivation, which is a feeling and I'm sure a lot of people can connect to. I also love that the powers come from the tower, but aren't anything that is shown in the Dark Tower series. Honestly, my favorite thing about them is they're controlled by 2 elderly people who are running around fighting a cosmically powered being. I hope that's just enough to wet your whistle about the ridiculous wonderfulness that is Insomnia.
Yeah, that just sounds like gobbledygook to me. So no spoilers here. Yeah, that's fine. Cool.
Insomnia is a good book, and I agree. The power in Insomnia is really cool. The way King describes it is really cool.
Fun.
It's very different and new and exciting, and I look forward to talking about that book with you.
All right. Lord of Change says, in the Inkheart series, the main character Meggie and her father Mo can bring characters in books to life by reading them aloud. In later books in the series, they use the power to enter the books themselves. Used to love these books and maybe due for a reread. That sounds pretty awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool concept. Like, it's never heard of that before. As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, I can think of so many ways this could go. This is such a fertile concept.
Yeah, but it could go real bad too.
Oh, sure. That's the best part.
You're evil. No, it's great. I've never read those books, but I think I watched there was a movie, right? I think I watched a movie.
Interesting. Inkheart? I've never even heard of it.
I think it's YA, I think,
okay.
So maybe that's why.
All right.
Next, we have Complicated 9519, who says, I finally get to say that you guys talked and hyped up Worm so much, I ended up listening to the audio podcast version of it without even fully knowing what it is, and I love it. That makes us happy.
Yes.
So Complicated picks a power from Worm, and that is the character of Labyrinth, who has the power to construct and deconstruct interactive projections. It would be an amazing and beautiful power to have. I totally agree with that. And then they go on to say that I finally caught up with you guys at the beginning of Wolves of the Calla and read through the book with you guys at your pace. But once that book ended, I blasted through the rest of the 2 books within a week, and I'm officially done with my 3rd read through by the time you guys started this book. He says, I don't know how you do it, Matt.
Me neither. It always sucks to have to stop. Not gonna lie, but it's so fun. It's so worth it. It's so fun to have these conversations.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
We could not have these conversations if I just blew on through the books, obviously. So
totally, and I agree with you. Complicated. Labyrinth's power in Worm is cool. I hope we're being vague enough about Worm to make people go, "Ooh, I want to read that."
I mean, I'm not surprised to see Worm answers here, because a lot of the fun of the book is the creative and interesting and complex powers in that book.
Yeah, and a lot of I agree with that, but I think it goes beyond that, because one of the most fun things for me about Worm, and I'm going to try to phrase this in a way that isn't spoiling it, but the powers that characters have in that book reflect very directly upon who they are as characters.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and in really fun ways.
I agree with you, Scott. You'll be shocked to hear. Yes. Pear Jane says, I'm sure I'm missing something, but I keep coming back to Firestarter. She's pyrokinetic and telekinetic and telepathic. She got the full package, poor little boo. I hold a close place in my heart because the movie was on all the time in the 80s. I love the book more, and watching it as a parent is emotionally gutting. When I showed it to my kids, my 6th grader said, she's like 11. No, 11 is like Charlie. So Charlie wins my vote. That's fun. And then they also say coolest power ever. Door from Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. Door creates doors, which seems like not that impressive unless you're created by Neil Gaiman, in which case creating doors is so powerful that assassins are after you. Cool. I've never heard of I've never read Neverwhere, so that sounds fun.
No, I've read every Neil Gaiman novel, but I don't. Is Neverwhere his short story collection? I'm not sure. I thought I read every Neil Gaiman novel. Maybe I haven't. I have to look this up.
I guess you got some research to do.
It is a novel. How come I never read this?
What the hell, man?
What the hell, me? I gotta get on it. And apparently the audiobook has Anthony Head in it.
Cool.
Who you should know, Matt.
Anthony.
You don't know.
Anthony Head.
Anthony Stewart Head plays a little character called Giles in a little television show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's never going to stop, Matt. It's never going to stop.
I knew it as soon as you started. Okay. All right.
Up next, we have Dark Gazing, who says it has to be the Shining / Touch. It's intrinsically linked to both Roland's old and new quartet, with first Elaine and now Jake providing information that in turn guides Roland as Din, sort of like a spidey sense on steroids. But they also facilitate and amplify the group telepathy too, and it's hard to tell how much is actually the power of quartet alone. And the next part of their answer has mild spoilers for Dr. Sleep, so if you're really concerned about that, skip ahead about 30 seconds. But he says, and for all the downsides it has for Danny in The Shining, it also helps save him. By the middle of Dr. Sleep, he has the ability to deal with the evil ghosts in a really cool way. He also gains the titular moniker by using his powers to help facilitate people's passing away in the hospice, which gives him a purpose and a feeling of duty. So Dr. Sleep is not the most popular Stephen King novel. I loved it. I really did. And Mike Flanagan's version of the movie is one of the best movies of last year, so that just makes me appreciate the book even more. So I agree with you, Dark Gazing. Dr. Sleep, such a good book. You have to read The Shining first, Matt.
Yeah, I want to read both. Those are, for whatever reason, both of those are near the top of my list for next king after the Dark Tower.
Cool.
Bavarian Barbarian says they always enjoy it when special powers are tied to who a character really is. Within Dark Tower, the one I find most intriguing is Father Callahan's ability to wander between worlds. He was lost, unmoored, and had lost his spiritual tethers, so naturally his ability to become dimensionally misplaced. And he doesn't even get any of the usual perks that dimensional refugees get to enjoy, like being able to plagiarize stories from another world. As for non-king, they'll go with Twig's main character, Sylvester. So just as background, Twig is another web novel written by the same man who wrote Worm. It's his third novel, and I love Twig. I recommend that one as well, actually. Although I think Worm is like the most accessible, so that's the one I always recommend first. Anyway, they say that they describe. I think I might just skip this because it's pretty. It's kind of spoilery. So okay. I'm gonna skip the explanation. Just say that the character is Sylvester in the book Twig, which is another wild bow power by that author. So cool.
Next up, we have Jezebelzebub, who also says Firestarter. They say, I'd love to have Andy's push. I could get so much more shit done if I could just give a little push now and then. Of course, the downside is that the more intellectually challenged a person is, the harder it is to push him, her, them. I'm often in an area where dipshits reign supreme, so either I'd have to move to where smart people are or really keep up with my mental workouts. Like Andy says, the brain is a muscle that can move the world. They say their favorite non-Stephen King power is just time manipulation in general. I'm not even trying to be greedy about it. I'd settle for being able to freeze time a moment for like 20 seconds.
Sure. Me too. I'd settle for that.
Yeah, I'd settle for that.
I'd settle for the mere power of flight. I'd settle for flight. Anyway, Unplugged Gem says, as a favorite power, whatever power it is that the Man in Black / Randall Flagg has, he's a super powerful sorcerer with the ability to bring back the dead, change his appearance at will, influence time, and wreak havoc everywhere he goes. I really hate him, but he's basically the perfect villain. Yeah, I mean,
when you're right, you're right.
I don't really have a firm grip on what his power is, and I kind of like that, actually. It's like,
yeah,
it just makes him more of a wild card.
Yeah, the magic system, if you could even call it that, in these novels is very soft, and it's good that way.
Yes.
Spooky Maru says, I haven't read it in a while, but I think Jack Sawyer's power in Black House is my favorite. There's this moment in the middle where he's talking to a prisoner, and I just love that moment, and him in Black House. Yeah, a lot of people like Jack Sawyer. I just think I like him in The Talisman better than I like him in Black House, but that's okay.
So that's another King book?
Yes. Cool. Both The Talisman and a Black House are books that King wrote with Peter Straub. They collective, cool. And we will be reading those most likely because they are kind of connected to the Dark Tower.
Cool. Merlin Spears says Ralph from Insomnia. They say, I did a sleep deprivation experiment in college and eventually had a moment of waking dream like a daydream. Ralph is a brave and kind person. His power is seeing the universe most of us miss. That's fun.
Mm-hmm. Up next, we have Public Defender 716, who says, my favorite power is won by a certain person in the book Hearts in Atlantis. To avoid spoilers, I'll just stop there. I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
And I'll just stop there too.
Awesome. Zach K says, this one's tough because King loves to use powers as a character trait almost too often. My favorite would have to be Edgar Freemantle's ghost arm in Duma Key. That is a sequence of words.
I love that you're just getting like just little hints at stuff here, and are just probably both confused but also like, really intrigued, I hope.
Yeah. They say King keeps the properties and implications of this ability veiled until the last chunk of the book, which has to be one of my favorite climactic moments ever. Honorable mention to John Smith from The Dead Zone, who has a creepy and intriguing ability, but unfortunately the book crashes and burns, and then reburns several times over.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Still worth a read, according to Zach. So there you go.
Daniel M. says, in King stories, when I try to think of my favorite powers, the first person that popped into my head was Abra from Dr. Sleep. The girl had mad skills, and the stuff she could do with her mind was pretty uncanny. That being said, in the Superpowered series by Drew Hayes, a character named Nick has the power to control chance. It's described as pretty weak and lame. However, when he gets juiced up, all of a sudden it's like an acid trip. This is like the third time people have recommended Superpowers. I'm really going to have to read that thing.
Yeah, it seems somewhat up our alley, actually.
Indeed.
Nathan C. says, I have to start off by saying that I'm so happy that they can participate in the discussion questions. They say their favorite power in a Stephen King novel is actually just the power of unity as a recurring theme, which is overly prevalent in it. The friendship that is shared by Bill, Richie, Stan, Eddie, and Bev is what keeps them safe and gives them the power to fight the horrors they face. I love this theme because it is so basic yet so powerful, something we can all take a lesson from, and we are better together. So the power of love, which is going to be the thing that saves the Dark Tower, hopefully.
That's the power of love. You can't say the power of love without singing Huey Lewis and the News. It's the truth.
You're right. It's my understanding of the truth as well.
Eric T says, amongst the quartet, I think Roland's power is the best. From the first line of the books, he follows. He is described as mentally slow, but I don't interpret that as stupid so much as not rushed. In all things, Roland is inexorable, imminent, constant. He goes in what turns out to be an effective direction and does things that he hasn't even thought through to follow the trail that leads to where he is now, in a position to attempt to gain the Dark Tower and save everything. That manifests as the Jawbone stuff, chasing the man in black even though he didn't know why he was, and drawing powered people to him who have turned out to be absolutely necessary. I like that view on Roland. I like it.
Yeah, it's a fun view on what his real power is.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah S. says, favorite powers in Stephen King, two come to mind. First, I thought of the short story, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. Not wanting to spoil too much, this guy's power is terrifying, and the more you think of it, the worse it feels. But again, I guess many people could come up with someone whose hand this guy could shake. I'm going to guess it's a bad thing.
Matt.
The second, I thought of Ralph in Insomnia. The way he can see the auras around people and even around flowers in a vase. Let's just say I haven't been able to look at flowers in a vase the same way in probably more than 15 years since I read that book. I recently listened to the audiobook and I enjoyed it even more than the first time I read it. Also, I know a person who claims she has a similar power, saying she can feel if people are good or bad. And when she told me she had seen a young kid who felt so purely evil it seemed he was surrounded by some black cloud or something, she freaked me out. Okay.
I'm a little freaked out too. Did you find the Antichrist?
Okay, yeah. I hope you keep tabs on the kid for us. Appreciate it.
I am a little surprised that we saw Ralph as many times in this answer as we did. I liked Insomnia a lot. I just recently reread it, and I really enjoy that book. I did not know that as many people enjoyed it as this. So that's fun to see. Really cool. But that's it. Thank you so much for all the answers, everyone. We really enjoyed these. I really like... I love asking Stephen King specific questions because I think I'm slowly converting Matt, everyone. And the more we give him little hints at the crazy stuff that gets up in other Stephen King novels, I think the better we're doing. So thank you for all your answers, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Next week's question, though. In this week's reading, we had the little turtle carving that was this object of power, this kind of totem of power. And I want to hear about your favorite objects/totems of power in other stories, in literature, in movies and television shows. What is your favorite instance of these little knickknacks that have great power in them? And more importantly, in your answer, tell me, how does that totem tie into the theme of the story? Please don't spoil any Dark Tower stuff. We won't read it. Please don't. And try to be... I know when we're talking about themes, there's a chance to spoil other works as well. Try to be as vague as possible in that, and I'll read them all before I say them. So if you're unsure, just do your best, and we'll make the final call ourselves. But I want to talk about totems of power, of objects of power, because these things are really fascinating to me in the way they. I mean, the One Ring is the most obvious example of that.
Yeah, well,
Matt?
You can pick that if you want, but
you can if you want.
Yeah. And I mean, Stephen King's got a whole book where there's a little store that's full of these things.
Yeah.
It's the one that I keep referencing every single week.
Because it's the only one
one I read, yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, that is all for us here on Kingslingers this week. Next week, Susannah sings a few more bars as we cover the 8th and 9th stanzas of Song of Susannah.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach out to us via kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter @kingslingerspod. Of course, the subreddit r/doofmedia is also a great place to hang out and answer the discussion questions.
Yeah, and if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else that podcasts exist in the world.
Yeah, if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, you can donate to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can join, for example, at the $5 level, and you can then join us this weekend for a Doof and Chill, which is basically usually me and Scott and a few other Doof crew people hanging out in a YouTube live stream doing some kind of fun activity. This is October, so we're going to be telling scary stories.
Yeah.
Or something.
We're calling it Are You a Doof of the Dark?
I get it. It took me a second. All right. Special thanks to new patrons this week. New Badoofs, Elliot, Sang P, and Jason B. And new Doof Troopers, Tony D, Sally H, Matt E, Emma F, and Michael W, and Devin H. And we have a lot this week because we have a lot of people joining to check out our recently released episode of our patron-only podcast where we talked about Stand By Me. So
yeah. That came out last week, and the response was great. Thank you so much to everyone who signed up or upgraded to that level to check out that podcast. The response to that was great and very encouraging and makes us excited to do more of those. Yeah. So it's still there. If you want to upgrade right now, you can see it, and all of our other audio bonus content. I think there's a new thing coming out tomorrow, which is yesterday for you people listening to this. So there should be a new episode of something else. I forget what it was. It's not something Matt and I did. It's something one of our partners did. But we're trying to release a new piece of bonus content every week. It won't always be Matt and I talking about Stephen King stories, but it will be at least one a month is what we're shooting for. So thank you to everyone who wanted to check that out. It's so exciting to see the response. Like Matt and I we're coming to the end of October here, and we're coming to the end of October with one of our biggest Patreon months ever, which is just really encouraging. And it's because of each and every one of you guys that decided to check out this new thing we're doing. And so you have motivated me to spend a lot of time prepping for the one we're doing on Carrie next month, because I want to make sure we do a really good job of talking about that movie.
Can't wait.
All right. Of course, we don't want to leave out the folks of you who just listen, because we know that not everyone can afford to donate, and that is absolutely okay. This podcast will always be free forever. So you do not have to donate to get access to this, obviously, but there are still tons of ways you can help us if you can't afford to donate right now. You can share the podcast, as I know many of you are doing. Every week, we get a new email from someone that says, I found this podcast when someone shared it on my Stephen King Facebook group or my Stephen King subreddit or my just one of my friends. So you guys are doing a great job. Thank you to everyone who is sharing the podcast. You're doing Stephen King's work.
That's right.
I just substituted him for God in my head there. Of course, there are other ways you can help us out. Besides sharing, you can always leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, or if your podcasting platform allows reviews. Those reviews really do help us. They get people to notice the show and take it a little bit more seriously. And so please take the time to do that. This week's Spotlight review comes from a person named Dan Vack, who gives us 5 stars and says, amazing analysis. If you have read the series, you will enjoy this. If you haven't read the series, you will enjoy this. They dive deep into each section of each chapter and discuss the themes, ideas, and plot points in detail. Excellent listen. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to leave us a rating and a review. If you have left it and we haven't read it out loud, we're getting to it. I promise we will get to it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, folks, that is it. Long episode, 2 hours and 30 minutes, according to my timer. So we're just going to wrap this thing up. We will see you back here next week for the next 2 stanzas in the song. long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.